Magdiela Mata, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. It is Election Day in America, the moment we've all been anxiously awaiting since what feels like years.
GOP Chair Amy Carnevale and representatives from each of the 5 statewide ballot questions, plus a former and a current auditor, and CNN's John King and media maven Sue O'Connell. All that ahead on Election Day edition, Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. It's Election Day. Republicans are largely favored to win control of the U.S. Senate in this election. That's because the 2024 election map shows Democrats defending more seats in competitive states. NPR's Deirdre Walsh reports 2 red states will likely be the path for a GOP majority.
Democrats and the independents who caucus with them hold a 51-49 Senate majority now. But they appear likely to lose the seat of retiring West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. And Montana Democrat John Tester is competing in a solidly red state and needs voters to ticket split to win another term. Democrats are also defending Senate seats in the swing states of Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Republicans predict they will fend off challenges in Texas and Florida, while Democrats feel they have a good chance of keeping the seat of retiring Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema. The race to keep Ohio in the blue column is a dead heat. Deirdre Walsh, NPR News, Washington.
Every seat in the U.S. House of Representatives is being decided today, but it may not be clear right after the election which party will control the chamber in the next Congress. The presidential candidates have campaigned heavily in key swing states. Wisconsin is one of them. From member station WUWM, Chuck Quirmbach reports political experts say they're watching certain Wisconsin counties closely for their turnout rate.
Vice President Kamala Harris hopes to repeat President Joe Biden's win in Wisconsin in 2020. Republican Donald Trump narrowly won the state 4 years earlier. Carroll University political scientist Lily Gorin says she'll pay attention to how Trump is doing in 3 counties in suburban Milwaukee that typically go for the GOP.
If Donald Trump's going to carry the state of Wisconsin, he has to drive those numbers up from where they were 4 years ago.
Gorin says Republicans also have to do well in the small towns and rural areas of northern Wisconsin. She says the Democratic ticket must have strong turnout in urban areas, especially the cities of Milwaukee and Madison. For NPR News, I'm Chuck Quirmbach in Milwaukee.
There are an estimated 8 million young people eligible to vote in their first presidential election this year. They join a growing voting bloc that could play a crucial role in deciding the winner. NPR's Elena Moore reports.
Americans under 30 turned out in historically high numbers in 2020, but still at compared to older generations. It's a group that both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump have been courting. But given young voters were key to Joe Biden's win 4 years ago, Harris has more to lose this time around. She likely needs to win more than 60% of this group. An NPR analysis found that in recent presidential elections dating back to 2008, the Democrats who won all hit that 60% mark. Elena Moore, NPR News.
This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. This Election Day, all eyes will be on vote counting operations and how well city and town election officials handle what is expected to be a very heavy turnout. In Yarmouth, Town Clerk Mary Maslowski says plans are in place to make sure there's an accurate count.
With a lot of the disinformation and a lot of the accusations of voter fraud that occur across the country, if you look at the actual numbers of voter fraud, the numbers prove that it's significantly less than what the perception is out there.
Polls are open until 8 p.m., and some towns in Berkshire County will be tallying the election results the old-fashioned way, by hand. One of those towns is Sanesfield, where turnout was 80% in the last 2 presidential elections. The Berkshire Eagle reports that there are 703 registered voters in that town, and officials expect to see at least 550 ballots by the end of the day today. Last week, Sanesfield Town Clerk Douglas Miner held a training session to prepare poll workers for election night and how to hand count those ballots, telling the group that they should plan on a long and hectic night. Other news, commercial scalloping season opened on Nantucket late last week, and some fishermen are unhappy with the price per pound island buyers are willing to pay for scallops. That's according to the Nantucket Current. On Friday, fishermen received $12 a pound for scallops, down $3 from this time last year, and retailers are selling the scallops to customers at $22 to $26 per pound. Fishermen are reporting plenty of scallops, but say that the selling price is way too low, especially compared to prices off the island. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Rowdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The day is here. GBH News has you covered around the clock. Special coverage with National Public Radio begins at 7 o'clock tonight. Tomorrow on the show, live from the Boston Public Library, to put this whole situation, anxiety reducing as it is, in perspective, is historian Doris Kearns-Goodwin. Good morning, Jim.
How are you doing, by the way?
I'm like everybody else. I'm a basket case.
Should we read Borowitz this morning? He writes, the president has released strategic alcohol reserves before election night. Biden's approval rating is up to 94%, okay. He writes. That's our friend, Andy Borowitz. From now until 2 o'clock, we're opening text and phone lines to get your thoughts. Informal exit polling, your last-minute concerns before you do vote, or if you have voted. We will be talking to a lot of local candidates, Elizabeth Warren, her opponent John Deaton, a whole bunch, the governor, the attorney general, Congresswoman Presley, the head of the Republican Party in Massachusetts, representatives for the ballot questions. And in terms of the presidential race, here's a little bit of last night's closing arguments from both major candidates.
She's a crooked person. She's a bad person. Evil. She's an evil, sick, crazy. Oh, no. It starts with a B, but I won't say it. But Kamala is, this is known. She's a very low IQ person. And we don't need a low IQ individual. We've had that for 4 years. Can you imagine Mike? Oh, he says, put Mike in the ring with Kamala. That would be interesting.
So, America, it comes down to this. One more day. Just one more day in the most consequential election of our lifetime, and the momentum is on our side. And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win!
Well, I think that choice is pretty clear. By the way, when Trump was talking about Mike, he was talking about Mike Tyson being in the ring with Kamala Harris. That's quite nice. Call or text with your thoughts, 877-301-8970. But we're joined now on the phone by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who spent the weekend in New Hampshire campaigning for Kamala Harris, the entire Democratic ticket. And she, of course, herself is a candidate for re-election to the Senate. Good morning, Senator Warren.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us. So tell us why the voters of Massachusetts should continue to support you in the United States Senate.
Because it's about Senate control. If Massachusetts sends a Republican to the United States Senate instead of me, then the Republicans will be in charge. And that means not just how individuals vote, it's they get to set the agenda, what we vote on. And that means there is zero chance, that we will have a vote to make Roe versus Wade law of the land. It also means that people who literally don't believe in public education will be the people who will be in charge of education policy. The people who will be in charge of environmental policy will be climate deniers. The people who will be screening our judges will be people who will make sure that they are 100% behind Donald Trump and 100% opposed to abortion rights. The people who will be in charge of our health care will be people who are trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And the people who will be in charge of gun safety will be people who think thoughts and prayers are enough. So I am deeply grateful that the people of Massachusetts have sent me to Washington And I will fight for them. It is the honor of a lifetime. But make no mistake, one of the central issues is who will have control over the Senate agenda. Will it be the Republicans or will it be the Democrats? And I think the Republican extremists that are empowered when Republicans are in control would be terrible for Massachusetts and for the whole country.
Senator, when you're campaigning for your former colleague, Vice President Harris, are the arguments that strike the nerve the best the ones that are about why Trump shouldn't be president, or about why Kamala Harris should be president?
You know, I almost never talk about why Trump shouldn't be president. I think most of the people who show up at a rally where Elizabeth Warren is speaking are probably not big enthusiasts for Donald Trump anyway. What I do, though, because I do think it's important, my job when I'm out there is to talk to people who are inclined toward Kamala Harris and to say, let me talk to you about what it will mean to have Kamala in the White House and what it will mean if we can get that Democratic trifecta, that is, Democratic control of the Senate and the House at the same time. Week number 1, we will make Roe versus Wade law of the land, and that is worth fighting for. Week number 2, we will pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Right to vote, right to get your vote counted, anti-gerrymandering, and the senator from Massachusetts is pushing that this is the time to do D.C. statehood as well. And week number 3 is to meet the moment for workers. You know, 80% of workers in the United States today would join a union if they could, but the rules are tilted against them. So week number 3, we're going to pass the PRO Act. So everybody who wants to join a union will have the chance to join a union, because union membership is not only good for union members, it's also good for non-union workers. Their wages and benefits go up as well. And this is a way to get a little more balance back into the system, a little more power into the hands of workers. So I lay out the agenda, first 3 weeks of what we'll do if we can get that Democratic trifecta.
Senator Warren, good luck today, and thanks so much for giving us some of your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you
Our
very
pleasure.
much for joining us.
Senator Elizabeth Warren will be joined in a few minutes by John Deaton, who is a Republican challenger. You know, one of the interesting things today, you've seen these 2 outlying polls. I assume most of our listeners have. Iowa
New
for the
Hampshire.
first time, modest lead for Harris. That's a red state. And in New Hampshire, which has mostly been Harris by 3 to 7 points, a 28-point lead there. And the question, of course, are these outliers that don't represent reality, or are they picking up a last-minute trend? The woman who did the poll in Iowa, who's very respected, Selzer, says this is all about older, independent women breaking overwhelmingly away from Trump and for Kamala Harris.
Well, you know, we were yesterday talking about the issue of abortion. The Senator just mentioned it too. You wonder sometimes whether that's been underestimated, the women's vote regarding having their rights taken away. Millions of women have had abortions, and maybe they don't like to be thought of as criminals, you know, for what they did. So we'll see how that plays in the election. We don't know. Some places, though, like Florida, it's on the ballot in 10 states, but in Florida, you can vote to protect abortion rights, and you could still vote for the Republican ticket. So
well, it also needs 60% to be part of the Constitution in Florida. 2 of the 10 states you mentioned with abortion questions on the ballot are swing states,
That's
Nevada
right.
and Arizona. Joining us now is somebody who actually has a personal relationship with the Democratic candidate for president. She's also the Attorney General of Massachusetts. She's been campaigning and door knocking for Harris Walls in Pennsylvania this weekend. Attorney General Campbell, it's great to speak with you. Thanks for calling.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Happy Election Day.
Yeah, happy Election Day to you too, A.G. Campbell. So you were out in Pennsylvania, as Jim just said. What was the experience like? What did you hear from the ground?
It was amazing. First, I've been crisscrossing the country from Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, most recently. The ground game is remarkable. Hundreds of volunteers showing up, not just local folks, but also folks from other states, including blue states, showing up to do their part in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. but the response on the doors was amazing. I door knocked, I launched canvases, and now today we just have to keep reminding folks to get out and vote.
You know, Attorney General, I'm always, I don't know, perplexed is the right, wondering, when an Attorney General from Massachusetts goes to see voters in states where she doesn't live or represent people there, why do they care what you think? I don't mean that disrespectfully. It came out totally disrespectfully. I didn't mean it. Why do they care what the Attorney General of Massachusetts thinks?
It's well received. I say to them, you know, why the heck am I there? Number one is I'm there to promote the work of AGs. So in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, for example, you have 2 AG candidates who are running that we are helping to elect, Jeff Jackson in North Carolina, Eugene in Pennsylvania. We work closely with those offices on everything related to reproductive health care, gun violence prevention, consumer protection, especially for our elders, housing policy, you name it. And so you don't do this work within your own state. You do it across state lines. I mean, think about it. You can't solve climate justice issues by just staying in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
So people welcomed me in all of these states, talking about the work we do with certain candidates, but most importantly, how we need a partner in the work at the state level and at the federal level. And the best partner in this moment in time is absolutely Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. They get it. They have been working on the issues I just mentioned for a long time, have a track record of delivering while bringing people together. The rule of law, our democratic institutions that are under attack, that is, of course, national work that we're a part of. So it does make sense when we show up in other states. And let me tell you, in Pennsylvania alone, the gratitude I got for taking time out of a very busy schedule to show up, people really appreciated that. And I think it brought some enthusiasm to them in the last few days to keep pushing until they cross the finish line.
Yeah, I'm from Philadelphia. I hope you're telling them you know me, but that's
right.
That's a decision you have to make for yourself. Exactly.
In the city of brotherly love, of course. Attorney General Campbell, you often mention when you're with us that you are a woman of prayer. So how's your prayer today? What's your prayer doing today?
Well, I was praying this morning. I prayed, as I often do, for Kamala, who I've, as you know, known for a long time.
Yep.
I prayed for Doug. I prayed for this country. I prayed for Massachusetts, like I always do. I prayed for the folks who work in my office. And I'm leaving it in that space. I don't really carry anxiety and angst because I turn it over to prayer. I'm very faith-driven. And based on my prayer and her not taking this election for granted, Kamala can win if we do our part, which is not only to vote here in Massachusetts, but to encourage folks we know in battleground states to also vote today.
Attorney General, we really appreciate your time as always.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Good luck today.
Thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate it. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Are we taking a break
Before
right now?
John Parker, before we take a break, can we have a caller calling from Atlanta?
Oh, okay,
Obviously,
great.
one of the states where the polls will close earliest today. Let's squeeze him in. John, you're calling us from Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for having me on. I've been listening for 14 years.
Oh, thank you.
I've lived here for 3.5 years, and I just wanted to say love you and Marjorie to death.
Thank you. Thank you.
But, yeah, I was one of the millions of voters in Georgia, over 4 million that voted early on the first day of early voting. And I'm an educator, and as I was driving, I live in North Fulton County, one of the counties you'll see on the news tonight, I'm sure, but I work in Cobb County. And there were some long lines right when the polls were opening early this morning. So even despite a lot of people voting early, there were still some lines that I saw on the way to work this morning. So anxiously awaiting the polls closing this evening.
Yeah.
And as I say, Georgia is an early poll closing state, which will give us some indication maybe of what direction this is going. John, stay in touch with us. We really appreciate your call. We're going to do one more thing before we take a break, because we're now joined by the Republican challenger to the incumbent senator. That, of course, is Senator Warren, who we spoke to a minute ago. His name is John Deaton. John, pleasure to speak to you again. Thanks for calling in.
It is my pleasure, Jim.
Thank you, John Deaton, for calling in. So tell our listeners why the voters of Massachusetts should vote for you to replace Elizabeth Warren.
Well, you know, if you've been paying attention to my campaign, I've taking the high road, do not engage in rhetoric, name calling. Senator Warren, I've always said that Senator Warren, I think, had good intentions 12 years ago, but she's become part of this broken system in Washington, D.C., and her loyalty is to party and agenda versus country in Massachusetts. And I'm not a partisan person. I've been a Democrat. I've been a Republican, independent, donated to Democrats, donated to Republicans. And I think we need someone who brings a nonpartisan approach, who understands the daily struggles of everyday people. You know, I come from extreme poverty. Had a small business. I was struggling to pay my bills in my early 40s, like most people do today, and I understand that. And we face real problems in this country, whether it's immigration or debt crisis or inflation or foreign wars. And we just need someone who is going to reject the division and say, "Hey, is it good for Massachusetts, America? It is? Okay, call it liberal. I don't care, shaded in red or blue. I just don't care." And I think that's a refreshing approach.
You know, John Deaton, I know I speak for Marjorie. We both cheer on anybody who decides to run for office, Republican or Democrat, who is a person of goodwill. This is your first run. What's this been like for you?
Well, you know, it's been an interesting time. I mean, I knew how divided the country was. Or is, Jim, and the division is, I even underestimated, you know, how divisive it is. And, but it's been great for me because it's been an honor and a privilege to go all across the Commonwealth and meet people, and it's inspired me. And, you know, my challenge, of course, is most voters never heard of me until I ran in this race, even though I've been a lawyer here for 22 years. And so, if I'm able to get my name out there and they learn about me, then I can do well. And that's the biggest challenge for me.
Before you go,
it's been an honor.
Before you go, is Charlie Baker still getting your vote for president, I think you told us?
Well, I said that on the spot. You put me on the spot, and I thought of Charlie Baker as someone who is a moderate, who is able to work across the aisles. And so I think what we need to do, honestly, is we're going to get a new president, and regardless of who it is, you know, Jim, what I hope for is I hope for a decisive victory, no matter which side. We can't spend weeks and months not knowing who the president is. And whoever wins, I just hope to God that they take an approach to try to unite the country.
So I want to be clear, because I don't want to misrepresent you. Who did you vote for president?
I didn't vote for it. I blanked it.
Okay. John Deaton, it was good to meet you. We hope to see you again. Good luck today.
Luck, John.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
We've been speaking with John Deaton, Republican challenger to Senator Elizabeth Warren, and we do appreciate his calling in. Okay, we're hearing all
We're having a lot of problems with sound here.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a break and maybe you can get fixed?
Yeah, but when we come back, we're going to get those sounds straightened out, and we're going to talk to the people that are on the pro and against legalizing psychedelic drugs. That's next. Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
This is a coordinated monthly test of the broadcast stations of your area. Equipment that can quickly warn you during emergencies is being tested. If this had been an actual emergency, official messages would have followed the alert tone. This concludes this test of the emergency alert system.
After months of debates and campaigning, the 2024 election is finally here. I'm Adam Riley. Join us tonight for full coverage of this year's race. We'll bring you the latest as the polls close and the vote totals roll in, plus live scenes from reporters on the ground. Election 2024, starting tonight at 7 here on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Barrett Tree Service East. Their team of arborists and plant healthcare professionals provides sustainable management for the care of trees, plants, and lawns in the communities where they live and serve. Learn more at barretttreeeast.com. And the Museum of Science. Their Native American Heritage Celebration Weekend is November 16th and 17th. Tickets for select Omni films are available to all Saturday, November 16th, thanks to MathWorks, MOS.org.
An enclave of Armenian Christians has lived in the old city of Jerusalem for centuries.
The Armenian presence in Jerusalem dates back to the 4th century.
Now the community says it's facing an unprecedented threat, a legal dispute over a controversial real estate deal that has the community worried for its future. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Newbury Court, a full-service retirement community in Concord, Massachusetts. Newbury Court is committed to creating active, independent lifestyles for persons 62 and over. More at newburycourt.org. And Boston Ballet, presenting The Nutcracker. Beloved characters, luminous dancing, and Tchaikovsky's memorable score will enchant audiences of all ages this holiday season. On stage beginning November 29th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org.
I'm Jim Browdy. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. I think you get a taste so far of what the show today is going to be like. We spoke to the incumbent Democratic senator, Senator Warren. We spoke to a Republican challenger, John Deaton. In between, we spoke to the Attorney General of Massachusetts. Andrea Campbell has been traveling the swing states, the key states, the battleground states, to campaign for her friend, actually, Kamala Harris. Throughout the rest of the day, we will, in fact, in this hour, we'll hear from the yes and no sides briefly on question 4 around legalizing certain psychedelic drugs in certain circumstances. And another elected official has been campaigning around swing states, Mayor Wu. But right now, let's go to Gary on the road in New Hampshire. Welcome to Boston Public Radio. Gary, how are you?
Hey, I'm just fine. Love the show.
Thanks.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you a lot.
So I'm a retired doctor on the road on my way to New Hampshire to drive people to the polls.
And why are you doing that? Why are you doing it?
Because, well, I voted in Massachusetts already. I know how things are going to turn out, and I can be of use in New Hampshire. I think of myself as being responsible for almost 1% of the votes by which Maggie Hassan won a few years ago. Lots of people can't get to the polls. Either they've got some disability or they don't have transportation, and they weren't able to vote early. So doing my part.
Can I tell you, I can't tell you how much I admire what you and thousands of people are doing like you. Please call us again, Gary. Thank you. Good luck today in your work. In a second, we're going to be joined first by the vote no side of question 4. Question 4 would legalize certain psychedelic drugs. A yes vote on 4 would make it legal to grow psilocybin mushrooms and other psychedelics for personal use and create a framework for their therapeutic use. A no vote on 4 would keep these drugs illegal in Massachusetts. Dr. Nasir Ghami is a psychiatrist and researcher specializing in depression and bipolar illness. He's the head of the Massachusetts Psychiatric Association. He joins us now. Doctor, it's good to speak with you again.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So tell us why you want voters to vote no on question 4 that would legalize certain psychedelic drugs.
Yes, so we think that voters should vote no because this ballot question is not about mental health primarily. It's about home growth and distribution in an unregulated way, which will who harm the public, harm people with mental illnesses, and will not solve the mental health crisis.
Are you comfortable that you were able to get the word out as far and wide as you would have liked, Doctor?
Well, I'm president of the Massachusetts Psychiatric Society, and we're an all-volunteer organization.
Yeah.
We've never actually been involved in any prior ballot questions with cannabis or anything. So, we didn't have massive donations like the proponents, $5 to $10 million. Everything was just volunteer work for us. So we did what we could with a little help from some media consultants, and we did a lot more than we've ever done in the past. And we collaborated with the organized opposition. So I think we did a lot, but always could have done more.
Well, we're really glad you called us today. We're glad you participated in the debate we did on the show. And Dr. Gami, good luck today. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you,
too.
and good luck today.
Dr. Gami is urging a no vote on question 4. We'll speak to one of the lead spokespeople for the yes on 4 questions in a minute. You have text over there?
Well, Kamala Harris was on Saturday Night Live the other night, and people may recall there was a lot of joking about her name, rhyming with Kamala, Bamala, ba 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 ba, fa la la, all that kind of stuff. So Greg from Warwick, who is clearly not a fan of Kamala Harris, did a takeoff on that. He says if the country elects Kamala, it won't reduce the drama. It will only increase the trauma when Iran drops a nuclear bomb. That's from Greg in Warwick. However, I should point out to you, Greg, that almost every analyst says that Trump's pulling out of the Iran deal back when he became president has enabled Iran to move much more quickly toward creating that nuclear bomb. John Kerry was very involved in that negotiation. So if you're worried about the nuclear bomb, Trump is done us worse in getting them closer to creating a nuclear bomb.
Let me ask you, if Donald Trump loses this election, would you conclude that his closing arguments for the last 9 days, his own, did him in?
Well, there's a lot of issues. I mean, there's abortion, which is a huge issue. There's climate, particularly for young people, which is a huge issue. There's just the idea that you have all these people that work closest with him, the generals and the people in national security, say he's a dangerous man and is a fascist, which is a problem.
But voters know that, and it's been a dead heat. So the question is...
Well, I don't think... I say this over and over again. Listen to this. This is a texter. I have a teenage niece who told me if she could vote, she'd vote for Trump because morally she doesn't think Kamala is a good pick. Just goes to show you how warped the media can be. I'm not sure where she gets her news, but I told her she's going by moral. She needs to consider the facts about Trump. That's so typical, I think. Where you look at all these things that are happening now on, Joe Rogan show, Dan Bongino show, all these people that have millions of listeners, all of whom have gone for Trump, by the way. The stuff that goes on those shows, or the stuff people get on their Twitter feed, on X, I mean, they believe it. And
I hear you, and I don't disagree with you about the impact of that. I'm just saying, with all that, it was a dead heat 10 days ago, and maybe even now. And I think that if Harris is successful tonight or tomorrow, Trump did himself in.
Well, that's what
an incredible 9 days.
That's
of
what the
closings.
pundits are saying. It probably doesn't do you much good to talk about shooting someone in the face, as he talked about with Liz Cheney, who is, MSNBC was talking about this in that podcast that I listened to. Isn't it interesting that it's been women so much that have stood up against Trump? Liz Cheney, Cassidy Hutchinson, the 2 poll workers down in Georgia.
You mean around the January 6th stuff?
Yes, around January 6th. And here you have the guys with most of the money in the world, the billionaires, that are running Facebook and that are running Google and that are running all these huge organizations like Amazon, are afraid of Trump. Isn't that interesting?
Dan and Sherborne, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for calling. Hi.
Hi, how are you today? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
My comment is that my parents and our family emigrated from Germany during Nazi times. And I'm thankful that they passed away because they would be absolutely horrified at what's going on in this country that they came to and they loved so much and they thought so much about, and we're so pleased to be here. And the other comment I have has to do with people who say they don't know who Kamala is. Well,
Whoops. We didn't Dan, we really apologize. All the calls just disappeared, and we didn't cut you off. Our apologies. Call back, and we will try to get to you. 877-301-8970 is our number. We are efforting. I hate efforting as a verb, by the way. We're supposed to be speaking to the yes side on question 4. We just spoke to the no side a minute ago, and a few minutes after that, we will be joined by Mayor Wu. In the interim, we'll take some calls. Let's talk to Bob in the hometown of Marjorie Egan. That'd be Fall River. Hey, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Morning, Marjorie and Jim.
Morning.
Hi.
It's been a kind of a hectic period here. Although I voted on October 13th by mail.
Oh, wow.
For a long time, they had our precinct was down in my community room, so I could roll out of bed and vote and go back to bed again. And then because of limited parking, they moved it to a middle school, mile and a half down the road. So I took advantage of the mail-in, and I voted in the presidential primary, and now the general election. And I except for 1966, my first general election, I've been what William Randolph Hearst characterized as a yellow dog Democrat, because the Republican Party has strayed a great deal from what I consider their ideals over the year, with the culmination coming with the Mar-a-Lago moron, and so I've been voting Democratic.
Well, I think one of the most interesting questions, and Bob, thank you much for your call, we appreciate it, is if Donald Trump is to lose this election, what happens to the Republican Party, which has totally become essentially the Donald Trump Party. We shall see. Bob, thank you very much for your call. 877-301-8970. Where are we going? Is that Dan who we just hung up on?
Yeah, we have some of the texters who are upset about John Deaton saying he didn't vote for president. On the other hand, we have Michelle, who says she's a registered Democrat her whole life, but she voted for Deaton. She doesn't expect him to win, but she loved his attitude and approach and hope he runs in the future.
By the way, there's another Republican who didn't vote for president, who was the most popular governor in our history.
Charlie Baker.
Charlie Baker.
I know. I kind of don't like that.
I don't like it either. My attitude is that even if you're not crazy about either, one is probably better in some things that you care about. So I'm not a don't vote kind of guy either. 877-301-8970. Please tell us where we're going there back in Brighton, if you don't mind. Or not. Okay. Where are we going back in Brighton, please? Marty and Lynn, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi, Marty.
Hi there. I just got back into the car. I'm a poll worker, and I heard John Deaton state that he did not vote for anyone in the presidential election. And I'm wondering, how can you campaign for someone to vote for yourself when you can't vote for the highest position in the land? What does that say about where your loyalty with the American people and the people of Massachusetts and New Hampshire lie?
Well, as I say, I tend to agree with you. I think Marjorie does too. But as I said a minute ago, a guy who used to be on our show once a month said repeatedly he would not vote for Trump. He wasn't going to vote for anybody. And his job approval was somewhere in the 70% range. Charlie Baker, how'd you feel about Baker not voting for anybody?
I feel the same way.
Okay.
I really do. You know, an old phrase, not to decide is to decide. You're letting somebody else make the decision for you. And my parents always said, if you don't actively participate, you don't have a voice in what goes wrong or right.
I couldn't agree more with your parents than you do. Marty, thank you. Good luck poll working. We appreciate it.
Just to underscore again what different worlds people live in. This is John and Beverly. A woman at a bar the other night said she voted for Trump because he'll stop migrants coming into the country. I said, what about January 6th? Didn't that disgust you? She said it was pollsters storming the Capitol and the cops knew what they were getting into. I rolled my eyes and paid my tab. But there
are a bunch of dead cops, by the way. It's one thing to be factually wrong. It's another thing to be factually wrong about something that led to such pain in so many families. I mean, do your damn research.
But here we are. I'm a fairly liberal person. You're a fairly liberal person. I get texts all day long with people talking about these kinds of things, that people are living in bubbles of misinformation. Now we're going to be joined.
A couple of seconds ago, we were speaking to a doctor who is urging a no vote on question 4. As we said, that's the one that would legalize certain psychedelic drugs under certain circumstances. We're now joined by a leader of the vote yes side. Emily Onishuk, the grassroots campaign director for Massachusetts for Mental Health Options. She served in the Navy as an explosive ordnance disposal and diving officer and found psychedelics to be an important tool to improve her own mental health after leaving the military. Emily, good to speak to you again.
Thank you, Jim and Marjorie. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. So, Emily, tell people why you think that they should vote yes on question 4, which would legalize some psychedelic drugs.
Yes, voting yes on question 4 is important because this is a really powerful mental health tool. And, you know, we're in the middle of a really complex mental health crisis, and the traditional options just aren't serving people. You know, I came out of the Navy with PTSD, depression, anxiety. I went through the VA. I did everything I thought I was supposed to do. And I wasn't improving. And natural psychedelic therapy helped me get to where I needed to be. And this question doesn't permit retail sales. It sets up a really strong regulated framework. And it's something that we can do right now to help people who are struggling. And that's why it matters. So get out and vote. You know, our website has tons of Q&A on it, maformentalhealth.org. And, you know, it's something I believe in. It's something hundreds and hundreds of people, you know, have stood behind: doctors, psychiatrists, first responders, veterans. You know, this can make a difference in what we're doing. So,
Emily,
thank you for having me.
Before you go, quickly, how do you feel about telling your personal story, which is a story that includes a lot of pain? How's that been for you?
It's been really difficult. You know, so a big part of my job is, I mean, honestly, like reliving the worst parts of my life, to show people, you know, how low I was and where I got to now. So the advocacy's been tough, but I think it's really important. You know, I went through a lot. I lost my little brother to gun violence. I was the first female Navy SEAL candidate at the same time. Yep, and did 5 years on active duty and came out with a lot of baggage. And this changed my life.
Emily, we were really glad to meet you. We're really glad you called in today. Good luck today, and stay in touch with us.
Appreciate you, Marjorie. Have a good one.
Yeah, good luck.
We appreciate
Thank you very much.
you calling in, too. That's Emily Onishuk, who is arguing for a yes vote on question 4. What are you laughing about?
You know, I just got the text from the guy that was making the jokes about Kamala and the Bamala and all the Iranians and all that kind of stuff. Mary from Dartmouth says, Kamala drop a Bamala? Don't we remember the genius who wanted to nuke a hurricane? And that, of course, would be Donald Trump, who thought that was a possibility to nuke the hurricane. And remember when he had the Sharpie, drew the Sharpie to say...
Oh, yes, I do, to change the map.
And by the way, in Project 2025, which we don't talk enough about, one of the things they're going to get rid of is the Weather Service because they think that they are perpetuating the myth of climate change.
Do we have to take a break? We do not. Okay, where are we going, please, in Brighton? Joshua in Providence, you are next on Boston Public Radio. Hey, Joshua, welcome.
Hi, Marjorie and Jim.
Hey.
Good to talk to you. I just wanted to say, first of all, I live in Providence. I was in Washington, D.C., living there during January 6th. Everything with my own eyes. It was just a shocking, thrilling thing to really experience. But what I wanted to share is, you know, there's so much mystery as to why Trump is so popular. I think it just comes down to the fact that for a lot of folks, the world is changing so quickly. People don't look like them, don't speak like them, don't worship like them. Despite everything we know about Trump being a rapist, a racist, an ideologue, a narcissist, a con man, they just want what was and what can't be, and trying to grasp and bring that back. I think that's really what it comes down to.
Can I tell you, I am so glad you called, not just because of your analysis. I've listened to the news all morning on my way in on as many different stations, and virtually every news person, including on NPR, for which I have great respect, in a totally normalizing way said Kamala Harris is the vice president for Joe Biden. She's running for the presidency. Donald Trump, the former president, would be the first president since Grover Cleveland to have non-consecutive terms. And in none of those reports did it mention the other part of his resume that Joshua mentioned. Felon, civilly found liable, sexual abuser, rapist, insurrectionist. And I, you know, even if you're a huge Donald Trump fan, I hope you would agree that's relevant to his resume. And if your position is it's fine to overlook it, that's fine, that's your choice. But it's, in my opinion, not really good journalism not to include critical parts of who he is.
Well, that's the argument that Margaret Sullivan makes, who's a media critic, that James Carville made to us the other day, that we talk about Kamala's position on the economy, and we shouldn't say enough about the economy, and then meanwhile, Trump is over there saying we should shoot Liz Cheney, or wouldn't it be nice if we had 9 guns pointed at her? But I think Joshua hit on something, though, and we've heard about this over and over again, that it is a difficult time to be particularly a young man in the United States of America today because your wages aren't keeping up with your expenses. Women are leaving you behind in terms of their education. You're not getting the education there. They're out earning you in many situations, and he appeals to this machismo thing. And I think for a lot of young men, that's maybe working. Those are the low propensity voters, supposedly. So we'll see if they come out and vote. But the divide of young men versus young women is huge.
Huge. Dan, you're the guy we dumped a few minutes ago unintentionally. You're back from Sherborne.
Yeah.
Welcome. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate you letting me make a comment about my parents.
Oh, of course.
And the other thing I was saying is for people who don't know Kamala, and I don't know how they can at this point, my point is if you're not sure and you vote for Kamala and you don't like what she's done, you can vote her out in 4 years. If Trump becomes president, it's going to be a generation or more before we can make all the changes to the damage that him and his ilk have done through all the way down through the courts.
Well, and also, Dan, to add to that, if she lost in 4 years, should she be elected, she'd probably leave. We heard Donald Trump say at a rally the other night he shouldn't have left in 2020. I don't know if that was rhetorical or real. Dan, thanks for calling a second time. We appreciate it, and particularly your story of your family. 877-301-8970. We should be joined in a minute by Mayor Wu, who has been campaigning all over the place for the Harris-Walz ticket. We mentioned these abortion ballot questions.
Yep.
And I believe there have been 6 votes since Roe v. Wade, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marjorie, in 6 different states since Roe v. Wade was repealed.
Like red states, like Kansas.
Right, and some were pro-choice, some would have limited abortion, and in all 6 cases, 6 out of 6, as you say, including in some red states, the pro-choice side has prevailed. And when you speak to the woman who is legendary that did that Iowa poll, there was a total outlier suggesting that in red Iowa that Kamala Harris would win. She's suggesting that Dobbs may have been the motivator, as people like you were saying for the last couple of years.
Because I think the numbers are 1 in 4, according to the Guttmacher Institute, 1 in 4 women over the age of 45 have had abortions. Many millions of women have had miscarriages. And when you hear that women have miscarriages and they can't get the care they need for a miscarriage because they're in some state with these ridiculous laws and they have to be close to death, that is pretty damn scary. It's like if you're in one of those states and you're pregnant and something bad happens, are you going to die? I think that's a motivator, Jim, for people to get out and vote, especially in places like Texas. Barbara in Natick, thank you for calling.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, you guys.
Hi.
It's so good to be on the line on this beautiful fall day when we are electing the first female president of the United States of America. She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
That was a hell of a call, Barbara. Thank you. Thank you for the call. Rather emotional,
Very
hell of a
emotional.
call, too.
You're, okay, we have a...
Isn't it interesting that she hasn't talked at all? Unlike Hillary Clinton, who talked a lot about being, and I don't know which is right, which is not right, about being the first woman president should she have won. Can't remember a time that Harris has talked about. Occasionally she talks about being a black person, particularly when she's done some of these radio shows, but that's pretty rare too. She doesn't really talk about it.
Well, it didn't go well for Hillary, emphasizing her femininity. Remember, everybody was in the white suffragette suits, white dresses, kind of symbolized that. It did not go that well. Here's a pro-Trump person, Jim, who's accosting you for saying, Jim, you just lied again. Not one cop died on January 6th. It's people like you who lie all day.
I didn't say they died
the
on January 6th.
They died after January 6th. That's
I did
right.
not say they died on January 6th.
One from injuries that he suffered on January 6th, and others from suicide.
Suicide, right.
Yep.
So please listen carefully.
But that's another false thing that goes around, the idea that, that this claim about dying that day, it was after that day.
Well, also, putting aside the fact that a handful of them died or took their own lives in the days after, look at the videos. These were people who pretend that nothing matters more than law enforcement. Democrats don't care about law enforcement, only Republicans do. And what does Trump call it? A love fest on January 6th. and has promised to, as president, pardon, I don't know if all of them, but a lot of the January 6th, what does he call them, hostages?
Yeah, and by the way,
6th.
the Proud Boys are talking again about what they're going to do dealing with the post-election time, and also about how they're going to be monitoring. Well, they're also talking about monitoring the election today with violence. And Enrico Tarrio, the head of the Proud Boys before us, is sentenced to 22 years for his actions on January 6th by a court. And so his getting out would, I think, would be rather a miscarriage of justice. Do we have time for
we do. Rodney and
Whalen. Thanks, Rodney.
Hi, Rodney.
Hi. I've called a couple times, but I had an experience in my life. I'm a 63-year-old male that didn't really realize how depressed I was or suicidal I've been all my life, even though you have to understand that I've actually went to the point of looking how to get my wife life insurance and doing a CO2 dye and all this, buy materials. So all my life I fought this. He got me into a therapist 2 years ago, did some work with her, and then sat down and did a massive amount of mushrooms on a Saturday, blindfolded, and it changed my whole life. I mean, I've done this. I've done the antidepressants. They didn't work. Nothing worked. And I just kind of badgered along. And the reason I'm here is pure luck that I'm still here at this age. And then I do this therapy, and it's gone. So as a person who is very healthy, I eat well, I'm a vegetarian now, I work out. This is not, I'm not like one that sits on the couch. You know, I'm successful even though I have issues. And yet every day was a problem. I just woke up and promised myself, well, tomorrow I'll do it. And that has gone away. And for someone that's really worked on myself, I'm 30 years sober. I've been in therapy. I've done everything I thought I could. But I got to let people know that when people are in this position, and it's the same as like Robin Williams, you know, I used to say he was in mental pain. If someone was in physical pain, they'd want to not be here as well. And the mental pain is just as seriously physically debilitating.
Rodney, we got to move, but you're obviously urging people to vote yes on 4, and thank you for the call. We're joined now on the phone by the mayor of Boston, who has been out on the campaign trail for the Harris Walls ticket. Mayor Wu, thanks so much for squeezing us in.
Good morning.
Thank you for calling.
Happy Election Day.
And to you, of course.
So, Mayor Wu, I know you were door knocking and helping out up in New Hampshire. What'd you hear up there? What was your sense?
I think everybody is a mix of anxious and excited. We've had some of our team members and various other volunteers from Boston out in several of the swing states over the last couple weeks. Pennsylvania primarily, Arizona, Wisconsin, Georgia, and some of us have been going up and down to New Hampshire on the weekends in the meantime. So I think especially in the swing states, people feel like there's a lot at stake. They know the election is coming, which is a great thing, and are eager to make their voices heard.
You know, Mayor Wu, I asked the Attorney General this question when she called earlier, and I've asked you this question before, so let's try it one more time. Why does somebody in another state care what the mayor of Boston thinks about who should be the next president?
I don't think it's so much that their own personal view is getting swayed by some other individual. I think, you know, human nature is that when our volunteers are on the doors and you hear the story of why someone else feels really connected to this decision, it might trigger something in your own experience as well. But most of it at this point and over the last couple of weeks has been just reminding people to make a plan to vote. Everyone can have the best of intentions, but then between school drop-off and something unexpected, we really want to just give that extra reminder that you have to find the window of time and remind all of your friends and family, too, that it comes, you know, you could have decided in your head, but unless you go and fill in that bubble, it doesn't make that the difference.
Last thing from me is the New Hampshire polls have shown, I think for a few months, a Harris victory in the 3 to 7% range, but the Trump people felt that it was narrowing enough that they sent his son, Donald Trump Jr., and I forget who else he went with just the other day. Then we wake up this morning to an outlying poll that shows Harris winning by 28 points, the Democratic candidate for governor crushing the Republican. Do you buy it, or do you think it's an aberration?
It's hard to tell. I mean, with most of the conversations that I've had or that I've heard reported back from door knocking, it's rare to find someone who really believes in the Republican candidate and their particular brand of politics or vision or character or leadership qualities. It's more that there is a sense that things are hard right now in the country, and people are trying everything they can to make ends meet and take care of their families, and it still felt so hard. And so the question is, who can represent changing that dynamic? And I think there's a lot to parse there in terms of whether continuing a Democratic administration with new leadership, policies, and keeping the progress going that sometimes can take a little while to manifest is the right choice, or the sort of overwhelming feeling of, well, we just want to scrap it all and start over with something new. And that's I think, the underlying dynamic and a lot of why this is so close.
Mayor Wu, we really appreciate you making time in your day for us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Wu.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
I just want to mention the dire straits that election workers find themselves in today.
It's incredible.
In places where cities like your hometown, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Milwaukee, were places where the vote's going to be close. The Atlantic has a piece this morning talking about the country in these swing states and some of these cities have turned tabulation centers into fortresses with rolls of razor wire atop fences, ballistic film reinforcing windows, election staffers running drills with law enforcement officers, studying nonviolent de-escalation tactics, learning protocols for encountering packages with white powder that might be fentanyl, which is a very dangerous, sometimes fatal powder. They talked about in your hometown of Philadelphia, they've actually moved the whole central election operation away from downtown to the northeastern part of the city. And they're talking about people being arrested already for threats against election officials. The Department of Justice is looking into, they've brought at least 20 charges so far. And it's just election day today. It's really kind of scary.
Horrible. Absolutely horrible. By the
Panic
way,
buttons for poll workers.
one last factoid here, an important one, I think, before we take our noon news break, and then we'll continue in the next hour. We'll talk to Sue O'Connell, both sides of question 2 on MCAS. Representative Presley, who's been campaigning all over the place, the governor, is in response to that text from that guy. The bipartisan Senate report found that at least 7 people lost their lives in connection with January 6th. Officer Brian Sicknick of the Capitol Police was attacked by the mob, died the following day. Officer Jeffrey Smith of the Metropolitan Police Department took his own life after the attack, and Officer Howard Liebengood of the Capitol Police died by suicide 4 days afterwards. And this was as a result of what the former president calls the love fest on January 6th. So, well,
he also said that the rally at Madison Square Garden was as beautiful an event as you could possibly imagine. It was full of love. So I don't think anybody a normal person would call either of those things full of love, which I sort of said something, I guess, about Donald Trump.
Can we just say one more thing, too? And I hope you all know this. In the 3 states we're in or surrounding us, polls close at 8 in New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, with some New Hampshire polls closing at 7 o'clock. So if you haven't voted, you have plenty of time. Please do it.
Okay, you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We'll be right back after the noon news. The next hour, we're going to talk with representatives on either side of question 2, whether to eliminate the MCAS as a graduation requirement, as well as our media maven, Sue O'Connell, Governor Maura Healey, and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. They'll all be with us in the next hour. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. How big is the universe? What is it made of? Questions like these have inspired amazing discoveries that have transformed our understanding of the universe since the 1970s. Don't miss NOVA, Decoding the Universe. Tomorrow night at 9 on GBH2.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. As the old saying goes, staying sane on Election Day is a lot like outrunning a wild coyote. We'll start the noon hour with our favorite media maven and coyote connoisseur, Sue O'Connell. Plus, representatives for and against Question 2. On MCAS, we'll hear from MTA President Max Page and Curry Rodriguez of the National Parents Union.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Still to come, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Governor Maura Healey, our colleagues in the GBH newsroom, Paris Alston and Liz Nisloss, and CNN's John King. And you. Where we can, we're making time to take calls and read texts at 877-3018 Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Long lines of voters are streaming in and out of schools, churches, community centers, and other polling sites across the United States on this final day of voting in a historic election. Early in-person voting totals shattered records nationally, but as NPR's Miles Parks reports, a large portion of the American public still votes on the first Tuesday of November.
Close to 80 million voters are expected to cast ballots today. And anytime that many people are doing the same thing on the same day, there will be hiccups. Whether it's power outages or websites crashing, experts say it's important to realize those are expected and not assume it means the process is rigged. Kentucky's Republican Secretary of State Michael Adams notes this is, after all, a process run by human beings.
In most of my counties, people go to church with the poll workers. They go to church with the county clerk. They see them at the grocery, right? Like, it's harder to accuse people of being crooks and stealing elections when you know them and you see them every day.
It could take officials a few days to tally enough votes to know who won the presidency. Miles Parks, NPR News, Washington.
Former President Donald Trump is making a third run for the White House. Last night, he closed out his campaign, as he did twice before, with a rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And as NPR's Danielle Kurtz-Laban reports, Trump's leaned into familiar messages.
He's still saying a lot of the same stuff. He's promising mass deportations. He's saying tariffs are a grand economic fix, though there are some real doubts about that. He also, though, the last couple of days has been spreading election disinformation preemptively. He's been spreading false stories about the Pennsylvania system while he's been in that state, which lays the groundwork for him and his supporters to deny the results if they so choose.
NPR's Danielle Kurtz-Laban. NPR's Tamara Keith tells us Vice President Harris and her campaign are still working to get out the vote.
Vice President Harris is calling into radio programs in every swing state today, still trying to reach potential voters before polls close. Campaign Chair Jen O'Malley Dillon says Election Day turnout will be key to what they expect to be an incredibly close race.
We really feel strong about the fundamentals, but we know we still have to work all the way to every poll closing to make sure every vote gets in there, and that's why we've built such an extraordinary organization to do just that.
That includes mobilizing thousands of volunteers to make calls, send text messages, and knock on doors to encourage likely supporters to vote, betting big on Election Day turnout. The Trump campaign encouraged early voting this year. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Voters are also deciding the balance of power when the 119th Congress commences in January. Up for election today, all 435 seats in the GOP-controlled U.S. House and 34 in the Democratic-led U.S. Senate. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up more than 300 points, or roughly 0.75%. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Voters across Massachusetts are headed to the polls today. Dorchester resident Dennis Ryan was out bright and early to cast his ballot at Florian Hall. He says there's one issue that's top of mind for him.
Most of all, freedom of speech. That is the number one issue that I'm coming out for today.
Absolutely.
The polls are open until 8 o'clock this evening. For anyone still hanging on to their mail-in ballot, officials say you should place it in one of your community's ballot drop boxes as soon as possible or hand it in directly to your local election office. Harvard students for Harris canvassed in Michigan over the weekend to try and push Vice President Kamala Harris to victory in the key battleground state. According to a spokesperson for the group, 30 participants knocked on upwards of 5,000 doors, mainly spoke to Arab American and Mexican American voters in southwest Detroit and in Dearborn. And former President Donald Trump and former Patriots coach Bill Belichick were all buddy-buddy yesterday, with Trump joining Belichick and sports commentator Jim Gray on the Let's Go podcast. The 24-minute Gab Fest covered a range of topics, including gambling and college sports, as well as NFL safety concerns. Bruins are spending Election Day north of the border. They're in Toronto for a game against the Maple Leafs tonight. Clouds and low 70s today, cloudy low 60s overnight, sun clouds mid 70s tomorrow. And we are at 68 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, where drivers can compare direct rates using Progressive's rate comparison tool. Customers can see options and rates side by side. More at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE.
Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. GBH has you covered around the clock.
Do you find that to be anxious applause, by the way? It sounds to me like anxious applause.
I'm anxious.
Not
but
talking
I think
about you, but
it's
go ahead.
throwing your anxiety out
Okay,
if you
fine.
keep clapping.
Sorry.
Maybe I'll clap from now until 10 o'clock
Shouldn't have
tonight.
brought that up. Go ahead.
Okay. GBH 89.7 has you covered around the clock. Special coverage with NPR begins at 7 o'clock tomorrow here at the show, also from the Boston Public Library. We're going to be joined by the very soothing historian Doris Kearns Goodwin that says things aren't, remember the Civil War? That was pretty bad, too. She can remind us of that. Juliet Kayyem and Michael Curry, who was out actually doing some poll watching, so we'll hear about that. You can also keep calling and texting. We can't take as many calls as usual today, but we can take some, and so you can call or text at 877-301-8970. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. And in this hour, we'll hear from both sides of questions 2, question 3. Actually, the no side on 3 won't be here. There isn't one. And question 5. Congresswoman Presley will join us, as will the governor of the Commonwealth. We're joined now, though, live at the library by our favorite local woman, that'd be media maven Sue O'Connell of NBC 10 Boston. For some reason, she brought her non-Colton Bradford co-host, this guy Corey Smith. Together, they host At Issues Sundays at 11:30, right after Meet the Press, and the two of them will be co-hosting election coverage at 7 o'clock on NECN and all their streaming platforms. Sue, it's great to see you. And
Good
Corey,
to see
I'm
you.
glad you came around here.
Yeah.
Jim and Marjorie, it's great to be with you both.
Well, it's great to meet you, too.
Sue, you know,
you get the new guest privilege here. You could start first. What do you think? What are you feeling? What's your assessment? You just voted. I saw that over at St. Cecilia's.
I won't tell you who I think will win, but I've been telling Sue I'm about 75-25. 75% of me says it's going to be close. 25% of me says it's going to be a blowout, and this is going to be one of the most anticlimactic elections ever.
Really?
I think so. I think just the momentum on the ground, and just from what you see in some of these polls and some of the folks that I follow who are the data nerds, the air could be sucked out of the night very, very early, depending on some of these early states.
Well, for those of us who are worried about staying up to 2 o'clock in the morning, that could be a good thing. But if the air is sucked in the wrong direction, Sue O'Connell, for some of us, that could be devastating.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Corey. Corey gave me a laminated chart yesterday, and I told him I loved him because he's also a data nerd. So we have all of our stuff ready to look at, and it really is the night. I don't want to say it would end early because none of the nights end early, but there are states that each of them, Trump and Harris, have to get to move forward. Harris has more mathematical ability to win, more paths than Trump does. But again, if we're down waiting for Nevada and Arizona, or either one of those, Nevada obviously doesn't have a lot of electoral votes, but those states, because a lot of people don't know, every state has their own rules about
Yes.
when they can start counting the mail-in ballots. There are states right now that are already counting them.
And Pennsylvania, where they are not,
Right.
arguably the most critical state.
Yep, and when they close, they'll be able to announce numbers, and then there are states where they can't even open the ballots until the voting stops. So that's kind of what this rollout problem is with where we're going to be. But I agree with Corey. I think it is going to be a blowout.
And by the way, you do?
Or close, yeah.
And you don't want to say in which
No, I
reason?
have said I think Kamala Harris is going to win overwhelmingly because I'm a commentator and I can say so.
And is that because of the Iowa, New Hampshire polling and these outlying polls? No.
I actually have been using the AI Claude, which I'm not paid by.
Claude will be on the show later today, by the way.
He's going to replace Corey very soon. It's going to be exciting. And I have been poring over the swing states numbers where there are new young women under 35 who have registered to vote, swing states where there are more female voters than male voters who turn out more frequently based on the data. And when I say I've been doing it, I've been asking Claude to do it, and Claude has been giving it back to me. And then looking at places like Pennsylvania, which has a very large Puerto Rican population, and also where there's a large Haitian population, which is in North Carolina. So I've been looking at the cells of voters, registered voters, who may actually inch things along a little bit to tip the scales.
You know, Corey, I said this on the air when there was a caller from Providence a few minutes ago who said something that I'm embarrassed I didn't. When I'm listening to all the media I could find this morning, including our own wildly competent NPR, they're describing this like two typical candidates. Donald Trump, former president, running for re-election. Other than Grover Cleveland, he'd be the first to serve non-successive terms. Vice president, former senator, etc. And not one of them mentioned, which I don't consider to be showing bias at all, what I'm about to say, but rather fact, that one of them is a convicted felon, an insurrectionist, found civilly liable for the equivalent of rape in New York. Why is that not part of a resume for responsible news people?
I think part of it is because we've been ingrained to sort of, maybe this is a bad way to put it, but sort of bow at the altar of objectivity. I can't be seen to be favoring one side or the other, so I'll do whatever it takes.
But is that favoring to say what is it seems to me
no,
to
you should
be an
be
essential part of the resume?
You should be able to, 1 + 1 is 2. It doesn't matter how many times you say it's 3, it's always going to be 2. And I think you've sort of maybe seen it a little bit towards the end of this race, the media finally having to address the sort of sane washing that's going on out there. And instead of somebody trying to interpret what Trump has been saying at his rallies, just take him literally. And it's funny because when Biden was in the race, you didn't see those interpreters out there saying, oh, this is what he meant. It's sort of obvious what he meant. Yet you have the sort of Trump whisperers who, again, to sort of, I guess maybe they feel like they're coming off as objective, are sort of parsing his words and saying, oh, no, this is what he really meant to say, even though he did not say that.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I would say I at the beginning of the coverage of this, I tried to make sure in my commentaries at 4:30 and 5:30 most days that I said, Trump was found guilty of this, Trump has been convicted of this. And after a while, I started to think, well, who am I saying this to? I mean, you know, I keep reminding people about this. I only have a certain amount of time on the air. Am I going to eat it up every single time, reminding people who seem to not care, right? You know, it's not like I'm giving them new news. So I actually thought about this the other day, how I hadn't said it in a couple of weeks to remind folks that this is not a normal election. But at the same time, you know, it obviously isn't landing with about half of the population of the United States of America.
Well,
so.
you know, you go back to Richard Nixon, who had to say, I'm not a crook. Because at the time, I think we wouldn't have elected a crook. But now half the country seems okay with electing a crook. So times have changed.
And I think some of the folks that we've even had on the show who are quote-unquote Trump surrogates, I don't think they believe that all of his ills and all of the sort of bad stuff on his resume sticks to them. They don't see a vote for him as an endorsement of those things, when it's really hard to look at somebody in the face and say, a man who mocked a disabled reporter might be president, and that's the guy I want to vote for. But that doesn't say anything about me.
But by the way, my attitude down on Corey, it is, I'm going to say it's fine. It's not fine. One is entitled to disregard certain things and consider other things. but they can't pretend they don't exist, I guess. Is it's sort of the Daniel Patrick Moynihan, former senator line. You can have your own opinion, you can't have your own facts. And that's essentially what I think we in the media have provided people by ignoring this critical part of one candidate's resume. We're talking to Corey Smith and Sue O'Connell from NBC 10 Boston.
Jim and I argue about this all the time. Fox News, which is which is hugely influential, particularly among older people, paid almost $1 billion for lying repeatedly about the election over and over. All their commentators were lying about the election being stolen, even though they knew it wasn't stolen, which is why they had to pay all that money. And I think a lot of these it's amazing. Joe Rogan, who's a huge, what's he got, 15 million listeners, something like that. People say wrong things all the time on his show, and he just lets them go. He doesn't correct them, either because he doesn't know or he doesn't want to. So, you have those 15 million people listening to a sane, washed commentator.
And some voters find the reason. I have friends, I'm from Texas originally, so I have Republican friends who are fully on board with the Republican Party, but not necessarily Donald Trump. And some of them say, I'm voting for Trump because I don't want to get my guns taken away. And I just turn to them and say, okay, but I don't need any hands to count how many guns Barack Obama took away over the course of his tenure in the presidency. But they find their issue. And
from Texas, so you're leaving out another guy who says, I'm voting for Trump because he said my wife was ugly and then my father killed JFK. That, of course, would be the incumbent Senator Ted Cruz.
Half of that is true.
And some of that is because Ted Cruz knows that if he does not go with Trump, then nobody is going to go with him.
What do you make of that race? I mean, that could be huge. Colin Allred, former NFL player,
I think
against Ted Cruz.
The football aspect of it is huge for him. The fact that he went to Baylor, a sort of religious institution, I think is big for him. The thing about Ted Cruz in Texas is Ted Cruz is probably the most despised Republican in the Senate by Republicans,
right?
And despised by Texans. That's why Beto got close in his race, and Texas has been skewing more purple-ish. But it always comes down to you can turn out El Paso, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas, but if you don't get the rurals, if you don't get West Texas to come out, you're not going to win.
It's like Pennsylvania.
I think Cruz wins, but I think the margin is slimmer.
What do the rules like about him?
Wait. Before you say that, what was the great line from a fellow Republican senator?
If he was murdered on the floor of the Senate, nobody would come to his defense. No one would testify in the trial.
Against them.
Yeah. We know people who know him also, who have gone to college with him, who also are just like he's the worst person on the face of the earth, and it's hysterical.
Nice. I'm sorry, Mark.
What is the attraction of Ted Cruz in the rural areas of Texas?
He's not a Democrat.
And that's it. Okay.
He likes Aruba.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, you talk about all the things on Trump's ledger. You look at what's on Ted Cruz's ledger. I mean, people died in that freeze. I have friends who are still waiting for their homes to be repaired when hell froze over in Texas, and Cruz gets on a plane and goes on vacation. But
to Cancun.
He's not a Democrat, and that
Cancun.
For a lot of Republicans, that's all that matters. I will say this: the one thing that is sort of changing in Texas, at least, where you have a supermajority of Republicans in the state legislature, when they tried to ram school choice through, you saw a lot of Republicans say, no, we're not doing that. Because in the rurals, they know that all this money that's going to be leaving our location, we can't just drive 100 miles to go to a nice private school or a nice charter school. And so you started sort of seeing that infighting. But I still think Texas is red enough for Ted Cruz to survive, but it's going to be a slimmer margin, possibly than we've ever really seen before. And that may not necessarily bode very well nationally for Trump, who I think is also going to win this.
So, Corey Smith, we really appreciate meeting you and your colleague, Sue O'Connell. It's great to see you, as always. You watch them on NBC 10 Boston, including their election coverage tonight. Great to see you both. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you very, very much for being here. We've been speaking with our media maven, Sue O'Connell and Corey Smith. Together they host At Issue on NBC 10 Boston, Sundays at 11:30 right after Meet the Press. They're co-hosting election coverage at 7 o'clock tonight on NECN and on streaming platforms. Thank you very much for being with us.
Joining us now, actually, is my congressperson. She's on the ballot today in the 7th Congressional District. I may have voted for her. Who knows? In any case, that would be Ayanna Pressley. She represents the state's 7th Congressional District, and she has been campaigning across a ton of swing states for the Harris-Walz ticket. Congresswoman Pressley, it's great to talk to you.
Great to be with you. Happy Election Day.
Happy to you, too.
Okay, I think a lot of us are too nervous to be happy, Congresswoman, but thank you. Thank you anyway. I know you've been all over the place. Georgia and North Carolina, the two states which could indicate, their polls closed early, could indicate where this is going. Tonight, you were in Pennsylvania yesterday, so what's your sense?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm just so inspired by people who understand that we're in a deeply consequential moment They feel a sense of urgency, but most of all, they feel clarity. Clarity about why they need to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz for that more just and inclusive America, for an administration that will see and center everyone and advance policies that lighten their load and make their dreams real, lowering the cost of housing, groceries, prescription drugs, making access to capital available to small business entrepreneurs, making it easier to purchase a home. You know, I think people are hopeful about what's possible.
You know, Congresswoman, since you have done this on the ground, I wonder, we get so many text messages from people who don't know about the prescription drugs or don't know about the CHIPS bill, don't know about what Inflation Reduction Act did. Have you found that people are kind of surprised in some cases when you do tell them these things?
You know, the reason why I'm not surprised, sorry, it's a bit of an echo on my end, guys.
We're okay here.
The reason why I'm not surprised is because people really don't care about politics.
Yeah.
What they care about is their lives. And so they might be the beneficiary of a policy, but they have no idea that exists because of a policy.
Yeah.
That exists because of the leadership of a responsive administration to your needs. Things like the child tax credit, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, lowering the cost of housing, lowering the cost of groceries. Those are policy choices. And those are the types of choices that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will make. And one example that I would offer is this opportunity agenda for black men. Here's an example of Kamala Harris running to be a president for everyone, who centers the humanity and the dignity of every worker, every family model, every individual that calls this country home. And she wants to be responsive to the unique challenges of everyone who calls this country home. And for black men, that's been disparate health outcomes, which is why she has a plan to address that, from diabetes to colon cancer to prostate cancer, legalizing recreational cannabis, recognizing that black men were disparately impacted by the war on drugs and locked up, and now have been locked out of a multi-billion-dollar industry, access to capital for aspiring entrepreneurs. And that's the foundation of a bill that she and I wrote together, the Saving Our Street Act, to support 1 million small businesses with access to capital up to $20,000. So she's responsive.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No.
Congresswoman, last question from me. In your travels, either directly to you or through other colleagues with whom you've worked in other states, how much resistance have you seen to the notion of a woman, a black woman, being president of the United States?
Jim, you know, as a black woman it's surreal that I'm sharing a ballot today with Kamala Harris. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts today, I was able to vote for a woman as my state senator in Liz Miranda. I was able to vote for a woman in my U.S. senator in Elizabeth Warren. And I was able to cast a ballot for who I believe will be the first woman and black woman president in this country. Kamala, many people feel themselves seen by her and see themselves in her story. So I wasn't met with direct resistance to the idea of a woman or a black woman. And, you know, when that happens, Jim, it's like people offer a proxy. You know, they're not blatant in it.
I understand
You know, a lot of those biases are so embedded they don't realize it. But honestly, she's run an incredible campaign. This is a campaign where she has extended the table, invited people from every walk of life, Democrats, independents, Republicans. I'm just so inspired. Y'all, I was with people 78 years old, 98 years old yesterday campaigning. I was with young people for just turning 18. This will be the first vote that they cast. I was with people who have been disenchanted and not engaged in politics for decades. And they traveled from across the country to come and phone bank, to make phone calls. People who donated $5 and up for the first time in their life. They're prepared to do an unprecedented thing in their own lives because they know we're at an unprecedented time in this country. And they are clear about the stakes, they're clear about the contrast, and they have clarity in this moment. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are about our freedoms and our future.
Ayanna Pressley, as always, we appreciate your time. Good luck today in your own race as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Congressman, for being with us. You know, I just want to insert this one text about the abortion issue.
Yeah.
This woman says, my son and daughter are expecting a baby they already love and have planned for. Our whole family is so excited, but they live in Texas. And the excitement of that news comes with a dose of anxiety. That is one of many reasons why I voted blue. And I just want to point out, I think a lot of people don't know that now, these days, when you are pregnant, you often have a test at 20 weeks that can determine things that can't be known earlier. And that the woman from Texas that had the horrible situation had to could afford to fly out of the state to get an abortion. At that 20-week test, you can find out that the baby has fatal fetal abnormalities, so that that baby is either going to die in utero or is going to die within minutes or hours of birth. And I don't think people realize that. So what the Texas law says is tough luck. Or maybe you can fly to another state, or maybe if you fly to another state, then you'll have to get your medical records submitted to the state of Texas to decide whether they should prosecute you. I mean, it's just crazy.
We're going to take a break. When we get back, we're going to hear from both sides of question 2. That's the one that would eliminate MCAS as a graduation requirement. Stay tuned.
After months of debates and campaigning, the 2024 election is finally here. I'm Adam Riley. Join us tonight for full coverage of this year's race. We'll bring you the latest as the polls close and the vote totals roll in, plus live scenes from reporters on the ground. Election 2024 starting tonight at 7 here on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com. And Cambridge Savings Bank, where they are committed to your financial well-being and community is at the core of everything they do. Cambridge Savings Bank, always you. More at cambridgesavings.com, member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We are live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. A little bit later in the hour, we'll hear from both sides of question 5. That would raise the tip wage for servers, people who work in restaurants. Governor Healy will call in about 15 minutes. We'll also hear from the yes side on question 3. There is no side on question 3. That's about unionization for rideshare drivers. But now we're going to address question 2. And as I'm sure you all know, a yes on question 2 would eliminate the MCAS graduation requirement, but not eliminate the test itself. Voting no would keep MCAS as a graduation requirement. Joined now by Max Page. Max is the president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association. He is representing yes on question 2. Max, thanks for calling in. We appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Max. So tell people why you think the voters of Massachusetts should vote yes to get rid of MCAS as a graduation requirement.
Well, we have had this incredible broad coalition, starting with educators and parents and the broader community. And what's become clear over the years is that the high-stakes use of the MCAS, that is to deny students a diploma even though they've passed all their classes, met all the requirements, is harmful to hundreds and hundreds of students every year. But actually, more broadly, it narrows the curriculum. It undermines the authentic education in classrooms. So we are thrilled about this campaign, and we think we're going to come to victory, which will, in the end, refocus us on authentic learning and our state's very high standards and get away from this intense focus on a high-stakes punitive test.
You know, this may be the most contentious question. So is there a yes on 2, I assume, website that people can check if they have yet to vote there, Max Page?
Absolutely. It's yes on question 2ma.com. And you will see on there the 70 legislators, including Congresswoman Presley, who was just on, who have endorsed this, along with Senator Warren, Congressman McGovern, and onwards, as well as 60 state legislators, dozens and dozens of unions and community groups, including the Mass Association of School Committees and the Massachusetts Parent Teacher Association. So we really have this incredible coalition of, as I say, educators, parents, and the broader community.
Max Page, yes on 2. We really appreciate your
thank
time.
you very
Thanks so
much,
much
Max
for
Page.
calling in. We're now joined by Curry Rodriguez. Curry is the founder of the National Parents Union. They are urging people in Massachusetts to vote no on question 2. Curry, welcome back. Good to talk to you.
Nice to be with you again.
Thanks.
So, Carrie, tell us why you want the voters of Massachusetts who have still yet to vote, why you want them to vote no on question 2.
This is really how we keep our promise to the children of the Commonwealth. Voting no is going to uphold Massachusetts' rigorous statewide graduation standard to ensure that every student is equipped with the essential skills that we need them to have to be able to access economic mobility and have success in trades, in college, and the workforce. And removing the standard is going to definitely undermine the educational quality across the state. And this is what is going to be able to sustain our drive towards equity and opportunity for all students, because this graduation standard helps to ensure that every child, regardless of their background, has access to an equitable education that prepares them for the future. It's how we hold the systems accountable for making sure we keep these promises and make sure that every child in the Commonwealth has access to a high-quality education. And that's why the governor of Massachusetts, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the secretary of education, the speaker of the House, the Senate president, the Association of School Superintendents have all come out in opposition to question 2. This is going to be damaging to our kids. It's going to be damaging to our communities and, frankly, damaging to our economy, not just now, but into the future.
What's the website for the vote no side there, Curry Rodriguez?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because this time I know. It's votenokestion2.org. I came prepared for that question this time, Jim.
That's terrific.
It's votenokestion2.org.
That's correct.
Curry, really appreciate your time.
Good luck, and
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much
Good luck
for joining us.
Curry Rodriguez urging a no on question 2. In a couple of minutes, we'll hear from Roxana Rivera. She's a yes on 3, which would deal with unionization of rideshare drivers. In the interim, let's take a few calls. Jenna in a car, you are next on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Great. Hello.
Hello.
Long time. Love your show.
Thanks.
And just appreciate you guys. So
Thank you.
I am a professor at one of the 9 state universities. And I just want to say that I voted yes on question 2 because I do not believe that high stakes tests should be used to measure the ability of our students. Just a couple of examples. The SAT is being not required by many colleges and universities for admissions. The GRE is not required for admission to many graduate programs in veterinary schools. And also, just anecdotally, when I was a grad student at Cornell, I worked in a science classroom. And in New York, they have the Regents exam, which is very similar to our MCAS.
Yep.
And I will say that the student I worked with did not teach to the test, but instead we engaged in high-impact practices. And his students scored higher on the Regents exam in biology than those teachers that did not engage in these high-impact practices.
Jenna, before you go, very quickly, if MCAS, if the yes prevails and MCAS's graduation requirement is removed, would you like to see the legislature impose some statewide standard mandatory for every one of the 351 cities and towns?
I don't think that's possible, Jim, because as we know, these standardized tests, they are skewed towards a certain population.
No, I don't mean tests. I mean, for example, a core curriculum, a standardized,
we don't have any standard
mandatory
statewide.
curriculum. Would you support that?
I believe that a core curriculum is not a bad idea. We have it at university.
Okay.
It makes students well-rounded. So,
Jenna, we really appreciate your thoughts and your call. Thank you so much for doing that.
By the way, we should point out that a lot of the schools that did get rid of the SAT are getting it back because they found that there were some very bright students from disadvantaged areas that were not getting considered because of the elimination of the SAT.
Well, if you're going to say that, we should also say, as we learned from Evan Horowitz yesterday, a majority of states do not have a high-stakes test that is a requirement to graduate. We're going to move on to question 3. A yes vote would allow for sector-wide collective bargaining, currently forbidden under state law, for drivers from companies like Uber and Lyft. And no vote, and there's no organized no campaign, so that's why they're not here, would keep the status quo and not allow these workers to unionize. Roxana Rivera joins us over the phone to make the case for a yes vote. She is a longtime labor organizer with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU. Roxana, good to talk to you again. Thanks for calling.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
So tell us why, Roxana, you want voters to vote yes on question 3.
So voting on question 3 will give rideshare drivers what every Massachusetts worker has already, is the option to join a union. So we feel that this is going to help not just drivers themselves, but also passengers alike who count on the service, right, to get to go about their day across the state. The majority of the rideshare drivers, they rely on this work to basically provide for their families, right? It has become the primary source of income for many rideshare drivers, yet they struggle to make ends meet with the low pay. So they really want to be able to have an option to join a union so that they can improve their working conditions and deal with other issues that they deal with, like, for example, unfair deactivation.
Roxana, a question that I asked you when you were here, and I want to ask again because I can't tell you how many texts and emails we've gotten about this, is Uber and Lyft spent, I think, in the neighborhood of $200 million opposing a ballot question in California not too long ago. And here, there doesn't seem to be any organized opposition. Why do you think that is?
So this is the first time that rideshare drivers have demanded a union. Mm-hmm. And given the popularity of unions, this is at its highest in the past decade. We do believe that, and with the support that drivers have gotten thus far, we do, and the polling showing it 2-1. I think the rideshare companies made a calculation that, they weren't going to win this one. And so that doesn't mean, and we're fully prepared, as drivers fight to implement their union, right? We do know that the rideshare companies will continue to advocate for their interests, which hasn't been thus far those of drivers.
Roxana Rivera, who wants you to vote yes on 3, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
And again, there is no organized no on 3, which is the only reason they are not represented here today. In a couple of minutes, we'll be joined by the governor. In the interim, we can take some calls at 877-301-8097. You know what we haven't asked the audience? Is your anxiety level as high as Marjorie's in terms, people are nodding. Is anybody not nodding? I guess the answer is everybody's in your boat. I hope it's a large boat there, Marjorie.
Well, aren't you a little bit anxious, Jim?
I am beyond a little bit anxious. I am but I can hide it a little bit better than you.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Lee in Medford, thank
you
for calling.
Hi, Lee. Welcome.
Oh, hi.
I love when people go, oh, it's like, we called them? No, you called us. Hi, Lee. No, I'm kidding. We're thrilled to have you. What's up? Thanks.
What's up?
Go ahead.
Oh, my comment is I'm not hearing much about the male vote with respect to the abortion question, but one thing that did cross my mind is if women are not allowed to proceed with their reproductive choices, there can be a lot of young men on the hook if they're not more careful. I suspect that there are a fair amount of men who aren't talking about how they're voting, but that is going to be something they're going to be thinking about, because if they're not, they better be.
Yeah, but Lee, you know what? Too many of them aren't on the hook. I mean, we don't enforce these. There's so many deadbeat dads all across America. That always kills me.
Didn't we used to publish their names in the Herald?
We used to publish their names in the Boston Herald.
I'm fine with that.
And some of these guys would owe, like, this would be 15 years ago. Some of these guys were like $200,000 and $195,000. That's what's a disgrace.
Yeah.
The states do not.
Of that too.
Massachusetts is better than most.
Yeah. I mean, what are we going to say, Lee?
Concrete. This is so concrete in terms of people's choices. I sure hope a lot of people are thinking about it, and I don't mean to be flippant, but there will be many, many, many people who are sorry about being careless about their choices, including voting for the wrong candidate. So let's just look forward to President Harris, because That's what I'm thinking about every minute. So thank you very much for your show.
Lee, thank you. We really appreciate your call. 877-301-8970, as always, is the number to call in, to text in, whatever moves you.
I'm a 62-year-old woman, registered Republican and a Florida resident. I've been a Republican all my life. I voted for Kamala Harris today and voted 100% up and down the ballot for Democrats and will continue to do so until Trump and his friends are gone from the Republican Party. There are a lot of Republicans like me. Don't worry about the number of Republicans voting. We're voting Democrat this year.
Did you hear, remember the term, we were reading it last night, you had the same material I did, the shy Harris voter?
Oh, yes.
This is sort of a takeoff on the shy Trump voter.
Yeah.
I think you remember in 2016, the argument as to why some pollsters underestimated the reach of Donald Trump, and he obviously won, was because there were a lot of people who weren't willing to admit that they were voting for Trump, shy Trump voters. What's a shy Harris voter?
A shy Harris voter. You may have seen the ad. Julie Roberts is in the ad, the actor Julie Roberts in the ad. And the point is that there are women whose husbands are staunch Trump supporters. And they either don't want to tell their husbands, they don't want to have a fight, or worse, they just don't want them to know that they're sneaking in and voting.
They're not sneaking in and voting.
They're not sneaking in and
voting.
voting. You go into the voting booth by yourself. But a lot of the stories reporting about this so-called shy voter are mentioning that canvassers will go door to door to talk to people, and in some, this is just anecdotally, of course, that the husbands do not want the wives to speak to the pollster or the canvasser that's at the door. And there was this great little scenario. I think it was on This American Life. I listened to their podcast over the weekend, where this woman is out talking to the interviewer in the yard while her husband is in the shower, because she doesn't want him to know that she's voting for Kamala Harris when he is voting for Donald Trump. So there is a huge gender gap in this election. But as I pointed out before, I think the ignorance surrounding reproductive health care and miscarriages and abortions is massive. And I would bet that I don't know the percentage, but I bet it's high. The number of people that voted against abortion rights have no idea of the complications that women go through.
877-301-8970. Thanks so much for the call. So I just got an email, my personal email, from Patricia. Enough, capital letters, about criminal Trump. You are like that proverbial capital letters broken record with 4 emojis crying. What do you say to Patricia about my incessant mentioning that he is found liable for sexual abuse, many dozens of felonies, and insurrectionists? What do you think about that?
The biggest thing, well, there are many big things to me. He's a climate change denier, which is a big problem. I would like to have Massachusetts keep its nice waterfront, Cape Cod keep its waterfront. I don't like to hear stories about people losing their homes day after day after places you wouldn't think they would, like Vermont or Ashland, North Carolina. But the other big thing is that when the people that work closest with him, the generals that work closest with him, they never talk about politicians. It's kind of their military code.
That's Bill Kristol's big point from the Bulwark.
Yes, but when the people that worked closest with him most intimately, that were appointed by him, that are Republicans, say he's a danger to the country, who knows what he's going to do, that should make you, if you don't care about him being a criminal, which he is, that should make you a little bit nervous too.
We're joined on the line by the governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey. She was in neighboring New Hampshire, where she was born, by the way, yesterday, campaigning for Democrats up and down the ballot, including supporting former Manchester Mayor Joyce Craig, who is the Democratic nominee for governor. I think she's on her way back to New Hampshire, actually. Governor Healey, thanks so much for calling in.
Hey, good afternoon. Happy Election Day.
Yes,
and to you, too.
Happy Election Day. People keep saying that, Governor. I think it's basket case Election Day for many of us. Anyway, but tell us what you've been spent a lot of time up in New Hampshire, where you're from. What do you sense going on up there with Kelly Ayotte?
Well, yeah, I actually just crossed the border. I was at the State House. I voted, then I was at the State House, and I just actually crossed the border I'm coming to Seabrook right now on Route 1, heading to my hometown of Hampton Falls, and we're going to be doing a bunch of stops there and in Hampton at my high school and Northampton, and we're going to be Portsmouth and on to UNH. What I'm sensing on the ground just generally is a lot of energy. I see huge momentum for Kamala Harris. In terms of New Hampshire, Kamala Harris is going to win New Hampshire, and I think Joyce Craig is going to beat Kelly Ayotte because freedom's on the ballot in New Hampshire, and I know that my home state where I grew up, worked, played sports, my family still lives. People believe in freedom, and Kelly Ayotte and Donald Trump have taken and want to take that freedom away, particularly when it comes to women and women's right to make decisions for themselves and women's right to access health care that they need, including abortion. So I'm feeling good.
You know, I am on both the mailing lists of Ayotte and Craig. And when I was reading Kelly Ayotte, the Republican candidate's campaign material last night, for a second, I thought she was running against you and not Joyce Craig. Her campaign seems to be, well, two things. One, even though I said I'd never vote for Trump years ago because I couldn't look my daughter in the eyes, now I can. That's one. And two, that we're not going to let New Hampshire become Massachusetts. Are people in New Hampshire, is that a compelling argument in New Hampshire?
I mean, I don't think so. As somebody who grew up here, and I have a lot of family and I have a lot of friends here, and you know what, most of us do, right? I mean, first of all, Kelly Ayotte is absolutely with Donald Trump, and she has had every opportunity, particularly over the last several days and weeks, to distance herself from him, to say that she disagrees with him. All of the terrible things that he said and done, and J.D. Vance, who, by the way, came to New Hampshire the other day to campaign, she's done none of it. So Kelly Ayotte is with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is with Kelly Ayotte, period. In terms of running against Massachusetts, I don't know what she's talking about. I mean, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, we're crossing the border all the time, right? We've got friends, family, we vacation in both places, we work in both places, right? Crossing the border every day, close to 100,000 people leave New Hampshire and come across the border to work in Massachusetts. I think we're a great state. You know, I love all of New England. Massachusetts, the only thing that she's consistent on is Massachusetts stands for reproductive freedom. We protect women's access to abortion. New Hampshire, sadly, is the only state that has not codified Roe. And so, as somebody who doesn't support Roe, she doesn't want to see that protection there. So, I mean, maybe I guess that's the only difference is she doesn't want to protect access to abortion and reproductive freedom and be like Massachusetts in that way. But you know, Massachusetts, we're doing all right. I cut taxes. We're number one for education, number one for healthcare, innovation. We're a great place to live.
You know, Governor Healy, I just have one last question for you. Chris Sununu is the governor of New Hampshire now, and we all remember that he predicted that there was no way until hell freezes over that Donald Trump is going to be the candidate for the Republican Party this year. He said that over and over again. He was a big supporter of Nikki Haley, who, of course, did not prevail. Is he paying any price, since you know so many people up there in New Hampshire, for doing a complete 180 flip-flop, talking about not being able to look yourself in the mirror? Does anybody call him out for just this inexplicable turnaround? He called Trump all these terrible names, and now he's on his team?
I don't know that people care. He's a lame duck. He's not on the ballot. It's certainly true that, you know, he, like so many unfortunate Republican leaders we've seen, have just completely capitulated to Donald Trump after denouncing him. I mean, he's in the camp of Lindsey Graham. I'm in the camp of Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, for the record, right? And really proud to stand with Republicans, conservative Republicans, who are calling out what really is at issue in this election, which is freedom and democracy. And so, Chris Sununu may stand with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Kelly Ayotte. I stand right now with General Milley and Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and a whole bunch of people across this country who want to see Kamala Harris win.
Let me tell you something. If Marjorie could be 1/10 as calm as you sound, Governor Healy, we'd be doing fine here. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. Good luck today.
Well, I appreciate you. Look, it is, this is Massachusetts, New England. We're bedrock for so much of this country and democracy, and your vote is your voice. So please get out there and vote today. If you haven't already, know that there are important candidates and important races up and down the ballot in your state, in your region. So make sure you get out there and vote.
Thanks, Governor. Good luck today.
Thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break. Right after the break, we're going to listen to the people on the pro and con side of whether to raise minimum wage for tip workers in Massachusetts. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Americans are headed to the polls for the final day of voting, and for once, both campaigns have the same message.
We're ready to get out the vote! We're ready to win!
Just go out and vote, and get your friends to vote too. Bring them along.
I'm Ari Shapiro. All the latest election news on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Neville Place Assisted Living in Cambridge, providing residents with wellness, care, and support services designed to help seniors stay sharp, social, and independent. More at nevilleplace.org/care. And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked the #1 pediatric hospital in the world by Newsweek. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow, Doris Kearns Goodwin will join us here at the library. John King from CNN will be counting the votes tonight, or at least reflecting the count, will join us in the 1 o'clock hour. Before we go to our next guest, an anonymous texter off what we just did a conversation with the governor. We were surprised when we got to the polls this morning in Massachusetts that Ayotte and Craig were not on the ballot. We have suffered through so many horrible ads, we felt we should be able to voice our opinion. We're in the same market, so in any case.
But you know what?
What?
How lucky are we to be in... Can you imagine living in your hometown of Philadelphia?
I can't
You'd
imagine.
be bombarded.
Pittsburgh is the most advertised city in the United States of America.
You'd be going crazy.
Here's question 5. I think you know. We've talked about it a lot. Whether to raise the minimum wage for tipped workers like restaurant servers to match the state minimum wage for all other workers, $15 an hour. A yes vote would gradually raise the tip minimum wage until it hits 15 in 2029. A no vote would keep the status quo, leaving employers responsible for filling the gap to $15 if tips don't get people there, in addition to the current minimum wage of $6.75. We're joined now by Grace McGovern. Grace is lead organizer for One Fair Wages campaign. She, of course, wants you to vote yes on question 5. Grace, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. So give our listeners your pitch. Why should they vote to raise minimum wage for tip workers?
Yeah, pretty simple. I think the practice of sub-minimum wages is a stated system that makes some of the lowest paid individuals in the state even more vulnerable to work exploitation. With theft, sexual harassment, racial inequity all become worse when we involve the two-tier wage system.
Hey, Grace, I'm going to hold you for a second because the connection is bad. Don't go away. We also have a leader of the no side here. We'll take Doug Bacon. We'll come back to you and hope the connection is better so people can hear you. As I say, we're now joined by Doug Bacon, who's the chair of the Committee to Protect Tips, owner of Red Paint Hospitality Group. He wants you to vote no on question 5. Doug, good to speak to you again. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. It's great to be with you again.
Yes, thank you for joining us. So let's switch gears here. And Doug, you tell us why you want people to vote no on raising the minimum wage for tip workers.
Thank you. So question 5 was brought to Massachusetts by a group of activists from California. It's very bad for Massachusetts. Servers and bartenders do not want it. They've made their voices very loud. Small businesses will be damaged by question 5 if it were to pass. And consumers will pay much higher prices on the menu. We've run a great campaign. I'm very proud of it. And everybody should vote no on question 5 because it's a bad fit for Massachusetts. Servers and bartenders are very well compensated. There is no sub-minimum wage in Massachusetts. Servers and bartenders are guaranteed to make $15 an hour by law. If anyone tries to cheat on that, they're subject to triple damages from the state. And we're grateful to have so much support from many elected officials, including our Governor Maura Healey, who made news on your show the day after I was with you, who gave strong support to voting no on question 5. As you know, she was a chief law enforcement officer in Massachusetts before she was governor, and she knows that there are protections available to workers who work for tips. So once again, very bad, a bad idea from California, bad for servers and bartenders, bad for consumers, and bad for small businesses. Everyone should vote no on question 5, and please get out and vote today.
Doug Bacon, we really appreciate your calling in, giving us some of your time on a busy day. Thanks so much.
Thank
Be
you, Doug.
well.
Good luck.
Good luck. Grace McGovern, who wants you to vote yes on 5, who we had to cut off because of a bad connection, is back. Grace, I hope this works. Welcome back.
I hope it works too. Hi,
Sounds
Jim
good.
and Mark.
You sound much better.
Continue.
Awesome. All right, yeah. So I'm asking people to vote 5 because I think the practice of sub-minimum wages are an outdated system that makes some of the lowest paid hourly workers in our state even more vulnerable to workplace exploitation, wage theft, sexual harassment, racial inequity. All is made worse by the two-tiered wage system. We've seen 7 states in the United States, plus, every other country in the world operate well without sub-minimum wages. And we've seen just very smart people of our state endorse a yes vote. Boston Globe endorsed yes. And perhaps the most important, the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, endorsed a yes vote, who is probably, the best voice to speak on workplace exploitation. We've seen fantastic reports from the UMass Amherst Labor Center that has shown just the overwhelming number of wage theft complaints and wage violations, not only across the state, but specifically from the restaurant industry. And eliminating the two-tiered wage system makes things a lot simpler. It makes things more consistent and dependable for workers. And it also takes away the burden for customers who have been subsidizing the labor costs for restaurant owners.
Grace McGovern, we really appreciate your giving it a second try and coming back and making your case yes on 5. We wish you luck, and thank you for calling in.
Thank you very much, Grace.
McGovern.
Thank you very much. Judy from Stores, Connecticut wants to remind us that Connecticut also abuts Massachusetts, and the polls there are open till 8 o'clock. So we have some listeners
Our apologies.
in Connecticut. Here's John from Wakefield. I voted this morning, now canvassing in Salem, Pelham, New Hampshire. Surprised with the number of Trump signage and flags. It's overkill, hoping, praying, working. For the only real opinion, he wants Harris Walls, but he sees a lot of Trump ban signs up there.
Let's go to Sheila in Acara. Sheila, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hey, Sheila.
Hi there, Jim and Marjorie.
Hi, Sheila.
It's nice to talk to you.
And you.
I wanted to tell you a little bit about Pennsylvania. I was there this weekend.
Oh.
And I have to say it's palpable, the feeling there, how important the election is. From my perspective, a sister-in-law who has never done this was certified to be on the polls so she could make sure it was done properly.
Great.
And there'd be no question. And I was so proud of her. And also, there is a feeling that you have to tell everyone to go and vote. I have had friends from here in Massachusetts text me and say, have you called your family to make sure they vote? Have you, friends down there you can tell to vote? And I just was so impressed with how important everyone is taking this. I also want to mention that the polls there, I am told today, are incredibly long. The turnout seems to be probably what was expected maybe in the battleground state it is. But it's nice to know that people care this much to get something done.
Sheila, Sheila, may I ask if your sister's nervous? Because we're hearing about, barbed wire and panic buttons and heavy police presence at the polls. Is she feeling a little anxious?
Nothing scares this sister-in-law. She's fantastic. So she's probably not, but she was aware of it. And yesterday, she spent the day studying every rule she could possibly study. She's an attorney, to make sure that every ballot was handled properly. And she just took it so seriously. And I hope that's how the polls are going, that everybody is taking it so seriously, so there's no question.
Hey, Sheila. I'm sorry. Quickly.
Sorry, Jim.
No,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, I have a very cute polling story from Scranton.
Quick.
Years ago, my father was on the polls saying to get out the vote. And he talked to an elderly woman on the phone, and he said, will you vote tomorrow? And she said, I will if you buy me a girdle. So we've come a long way. And I was thinking of it today, and I had to let you know.
Sheila, most of our young listeners are saying, what's a girdle? Exactly.
Exactly.
Hey, Sheila.
I'll say thanks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling. We really appreciate it.
That's right. We don't need girdles anymore because we have Spanx, Jim. Things
Exactly.
have moved on. Okay, we are done.
By the way, in terms of we're not done. We're done this hour.
Yes.
But before you go, we didn't read some texts also about New Hampshire voting. 2 people were texting in from the polls saying they've never seen turnout that huge. That's anecdotal, but apparently people are voting there. Oh, here it is. Anonymous texter, lines of voters were huge for the last 4 hours. Never saw so many at the polls in Peterborough. Another anonymous, I just voted in Salem, New Hampshire. I would say that women showing up to vote outnumbered men 2-1.
Yeah, well, I'm a little biased here. I would love to see women be the saviors of this election. We'll see what happens. Anyway.
Recent contribution to GBH, your donation could be doubled by your employer through our Matching Gifts program. Find out if your donation can be matched at gbh.org/matchinggifts.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Tools of the Mind, offering a bite of tools, professional development workshops empowering pre-K and kindergarten teachers with actionable strategies to propel children's self-regulation development. More at toolsofthemind.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the 2nd consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
I'm Equity and Justice reporter Trajan Warren, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Joining us this hour, CNN's John King, for his final thoughts before his
Day edition, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Former President Donald Trump has just cast his ballot in West Palm Beach, Florida. He told reporters afterward that he's confident his supporters won't get violent if the race doesn't go his way.
I don't have to tell them that there'll be no violence. Of course there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people. I don't have to tell them that. And I certainly don't want any violence, but I certainly don't have to tell. These are great people. These are people that believe in no violence.
Many pro-Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol January 6, 2021, as Congress was carrying out its duty of certifying the results of the 2020 election that President Biden won. Since then, Trump has maintained without evidence that the election was rigged. Today, National Guard troops across the country are on standby just in case there is unrest. Vice President Harris spoke to the Big Tigger Morning Show on V103 in Atlanta this morning. She's telling people who have yet to vote that her vision's focused on progress and her opponent's is not.
My opponent, he has a very different perspective on it all. He will walk into the Oval Office if he were elected with his enemies list. He's full of vengeance. He's full of grievance. It's all about himself. When I walk in on January 20th, I'll walk in with my to-do list on behalf of the American people.
Grant Blankenship of Georgia Public Broadcasting was at a voting site in Macon, Georgia earlier today. He has more.
The economy is a top issue for many Georgia voters. Paige and Jonathan DeCombs are among those worried about costs for their family as they left their voting precinct site in Macon. This is Paige.
I know when we lived during Trump's presidency, everything was much lower. Groceries were lower, gas was lower. So I'm just hoping to see that come down.
At the same poll, Marion Simmons says he trusts Kamala Harris to protect Social Security and to be a good leader.
Somebody gonna take care of her, not themselves. Donald Trump, he won't take care of himself.
Georgia began Election Day after record-shattering early voter turnout. For NPR News, I'm Grant Blankenship in Macon, Georgia.
Now, whoever's elected president will need Congress to advance their agenda. All 435 seats in the House and 34 in the Senate are up for election. Among the Senate races to watch, in Pennsylvania, Democrat Bob Casey's fending off a challenge from Republican businessman David McCormick. Another's in Montana. 3-term Democrat John Tester is facing Trump-backed Republican Tim Sheehy. And in Texas, Republican Senator Ted Cruz is fighting an underdog challenge from Democratic Representative Colin Allred. No Democrat has won statewide office in Texas in 30 years, but demographics are shifting in large part by a surging Latino population Democrats see as a plus for their party. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 446 points, more than 1% at 42,239. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. A number of local organizations are working to make sure that Massachusetts residents have no issues as they exercise their right to vote today. As GBH's Sarah Bentoncourt reports, they've observed some small hiccups at the polls.
Ivan Espinoza Madrigal is with the group Lawyers for Civil Rights. He says they've gotten reports of people displaying political paraphernalia too close to polling locations and access issues for people with disabilities. And in Malden, multiple voters reported problems with jammed machines.
If a machine is not working, then it can lead to placing ballots in unsecure locations. And so fixing the machines in real time is critically important.
State election officials worked with Lawyers for Civil Rights and on-site staff to solve the issue. Anyone who spots problems at the polls can report them to the nonpartisan group Election Protection. Sarah Bettencourt, GBH News, 89.7.
Secretary of State Bill Galvin says he doesn't know for sure how many people have cast a ballot as of 9:30 a.m. when he cast his, but he did say the final turnout may exceed the 3.6 million ballots that were cast in the 2020 presidential race. About 1.7 million ballots have already been cast during early voting and mailed-in voting, and Galvin adds that if you don't want to stand in long lines, it's best to vote as early as you can. Crowds start to emerge toward the evening as parents are picking up children from school and buses are taking the kids home. 69 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Subaru, featuring the 2024 Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness, with off-road capability and 9.3 inches of ground clearance designed for adventure seekers. Learn more at Subaru.com/wilderness.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. GBH is going to cover this election round the clock. Special coverage with NPR begins at 7 o'clock tonight, tomorrow, live from the Boston Public Library. The great historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, who just has obviously she's an historian, she's a great perspective on all this. Juliette Kaim, a national security expert, can't wait to talk to her about what's going on at the polls and the reemergence of Proud Boys. And Michael Curry, who actually has gone off to become a poll worker, we'll talk to him as well.
Fabulous.
I know, it is fabulous. I feel like I should be doing that. Well, I
and
guess
then
I can't
national
do
board
it.
of the NAACP. No, you sort of have to work during the day.
I can't be doing that. Well, I don't think it would be good for a journalist to be doing that.
Okay, our number,
you know what I mean?
I think you're right. 877-301-8970 for calling and texting. This hour, we hope to speak to John King from CNN in a couple of minutes. We will then speak to the heads of the state Republican and Democratic parties in Massachusetts. And then, interesting, a tale of two auditors. The former auditor, Suzanne Bump, who is urging a no on question 1, and the current auditor, Diana DeZoglio, who is urging a yes on question 1. We are now joined by a guy who may be, tonight, the most watched person in America. That would be CNN's chief national correspondent. Obviously, he and the Magic Wall are going to be governing our everything tonight. And I can't believe you found time for us today, but that's John King for you. John, welcome.
Happy Tuesday. Yeah, I'm going to be running the Magic Wall tonight, and I'm having trouble getting my Zoom working. That bodes well.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So John, you are the genius of the Magic Wall, and you know all these little tiny states and counties and all these kinds of little obscure parts of the country, rural areas of the country. But in the swing states, I've been reading lately that the polls are really tight, as we know, but there's a margin of error of about 3% in a lot of these polls. So we're still sort of don't know where this is going. Is that the bottom line here?
I think that's the safest way to put it, is that it's the closest in my lifetime. It's closer, the polls are closer than they were in 2016 or 2020. The one thing I would say is that Donald Trump is in the strongest poll position on Election Day of any of his 3 campaigns for president. But my giant question is, the polling industry has been trying to figure out Trump since 2016. And I think one of the legitimate questions is, do they have his vote right this time? Or is he underrepresented yet again? He has, in both 2016 and 2020, he overperformed in the swing states' his final polls. Or have they overcompensated? to try to get the Trump vote? And I don't think we know the answer to that question. And at this point, it's academic. It's, to be left for after we count the votes and after we find out who wins, and we go from there.
So early signals, John, I know that two states that close earlier than we do in New England are Georgia and North Carolina. If by some chance Kamala Harris were to win one of those, what would that tell us about this race?
Well, it would tell you that she is expanding her path to 270. I wouldn't jump to any conclusion. I think caution should be the operative word of the night. But if she's winning in Georgia and or North Carolina, that tells you in the Sun Belt states, she's having success. And, demographically, you could make the argument that those states should be more open to her in that they're the states that are changing. They're becoming more diverse, more suburban, more college educated by the day, which should tell you they're becoming more, at least in our current politics, more likely to vote Democratic. The Rust Belt states, the blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, are getting older and whiter by the day. And again, the data tell you that should make them less demographic, although all three have Democratic governors. And with the exception of 2016, when Trump won them, all three have voted for the Democrats since 1992. But if she were to win in one of the Sun Belt states, what you're trying to do here is expand the number of paths you have to 270. As we take states off the board, do they expand the number of ways you can get to 270, or do they shrink the number of ways you can get to 270? And so if she were to win Georgia or North Carolina, I would say that the likelihood of winning one of those states means that she's on a good path, but I would just be careful about that.
So other than those two states, John King, what are you looking at as early indicators of which way this thing may end up going?
Virginia closes at 7 o'clock. Now, we have no reason to believe that anything but what we expect is going to happen in Virginia, which is that it will stay blue for president. But, and this is an important but, it was a 10-point race 4 years ago. Joe Biden won Virginia by 10 points. Is the vice president winning it by 8 or 10? Or is she winning it by 3 or 4? Or is Donald Trump winning it, which I don't expect to happen. I'm just saying. But there are other states that we don't consider battlegrounds from which we can learn really important clues. There are a couple of very competitive House races in Virginia. Where's turnout in those races? They tend to overlap some of the suburban areas and the ex-urban areas, which I think are the key battlegrounds in this election. So we're going to obviously look at the 7 battleground states, but there are other places early on that will give us some clues. We tend to live now in a nationalized climate. We should be careful about that. What's happening in the suburbs of Northern Virginia isn't necessarily happening in the suburbs of Philly, in the suburbs of Atlanta, in the suburbs of Phoenix. But more often than not, it is what's happening in those suburbs in this nationalized climate. So I actually, there are a lot of people saying it's going to be Thursday or Friday. It may be Wednesday or Thursday or maybe Friday before we have somebody at 270. I'm a contrarian on that question. The states have learned from the 2020 experience. There are not as many mail-in ballots as 2020. The states promise they're going to try to count faster this time because we're not in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think we'll have a winner at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. tonight, but I think we're going to have some really strong clues.
Okay, so that means for those of us trying to plan our sleep schedule for tonight and tomorrow, that
if
we stay up till 1 or 2, I too have an espresso machine.
What kind of question is this for John King on election day?
Who knows better than Mr. Magic Wall, right? So we'll have some strong indication by 1 or 2, so we can go to bed feeling very happy or very miserable, and then maybe by the morning or mid-morning or tomorrow we will know more definitively. Is that fair?
Yes, stay up late with me, Marjorie. Magic loves company.
I'm going to stay up late with you, John, as late as it goes. I got the espresso going.
Hey, John,
can I just ask you one thing, though? Because I'm done. We get so many texts all day long on this show from people who don't believe that Trump is a criminal, who don't believe about the Trump University, who don't believe that the election was stolen, who don't believe that January 6th is anything else than a love fest. And since you interview so many people in your great series going across the country, I wonder when you talk to Trump people, is your sense that they don't believe some of the worst things he's done, or they don't care because they say they had more money when he was president?
There's a wide range of that. There are some people who are fully in the Trump media ecosystem who think that everything is unfair or everything about January 6th is exaggerated, and his critics have come after him. That is a decent-sized slice of the Trump base. There's a whole lot of other people who abhor some of his behavior, who wish he had spoken out very early on January 6th, who cringe a bit when you bring up whether it's the sexual assault allegations against him or the fraud allegations against him, but say that they don't trust the Democrats. And there are a lot of Trump voters who acknowledge his character issues, bad behavior issues, but see this as a defining crossroads election where the liberals are for, you see the Trump ads. They're for transgender rights, and they're for open borders, and Donald Trump's for us, for our version of America. That's the way they say it, actually, sometimes. I want my version of America back. And so that's I don't like using labels, but that's kind of a culture war definition where they say, yeah, he's not great at some things, but he's going to give me the things I want. And the other ones are dangerous to the future of our country. They essentially view the Harris-Biden agenda as more dangerous than Trump's rap sheet or character flaws. And even that's oversimplifying a little bit. The one thing I did learn from these travels is that Trump's coalition is a lot more diverse and complicated than his critics give him credit for. Yes, there are people who are all in, who have been listening to that ecosystem for 25 years, who essentially think there are undocumented immigrants under the table, ready to steal your wallet. But there are a lot of others who are all over the place, who are Republicans who would wish it were somebody else, who wish they were voting for Nikki Haley or someone else tonight, but they're going to vote for Donald Trump because they're Republicans.
Yeah.
Hey, John, by the way, one of our colleagues who's a marketing major said you should be marketing Magic Loves Company. There's huge potential in that. Before you go, John, last night in an act of incredible masochism, I watched on YouTube a compilation of maybe 5 minutes of Donald Trump saying the usual a la 2020, but now in 2024, the only way I'll lose is if the election is stolen, it's already rigged, it's already being stolen, etc. And then, at least in my estimation, the worst thing that could happen, there's a software malfunction in arguably the most critical state in Cambria County in Pennsylvania this morning. I know they say they're going to keep the polls open later. Before we hear the distortion of what happened, what actually did happen and what effect, if any, will it have on the vote?
You're going to see this from time to time, and there were a couple in Pennsylvania today where they've had some technical issues. There will be some others as we get through the night. Look, this happens. I just couldn't get into this by Zoom. I do this every Tuesday, right? And all of a sudden my phone locked up and I couldn't get in on Zoom. Is that my Wi-Fi at home? Is that because I'm old and stupid? I don't know, but I got through. I got through, and I'm on the radio, right? And
yes,
the people in these
thank
places
God.
are going to figure out. But the people in these places are going to figure out what they need to do, and they're going to if that means keeping the polls open, if that means whatever they have to do it. These are good, honest people across the country who, yes, have human error and glitches, but not widespread fraud. If there's anything that drives me nuts, having done this for almost 40 years now, is that there are Democrats and independents and Republicans and everything in between out there working the polls today who are going to count the votes. We should be celebrating these people.
Yeah.
They get paid little or nothing, and they do amazing work. They're the threads of our democracy. They're the foundation of our democracy. We should be celebrating them, and for people to raise questions about their integrity and denigrate the count. And we know where that mostly comes from, and we may see that at 11 o'clock tonight again. But people will figure it out. Stuff happens, and they will figure it out, and they'll do the best they can.
Well, speaking of a pretty important part of our democracy, as are you, John King, and we really appreciate your time today, and we will all be watching you tonight, so good luck and thanks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much,
Stay up late.
John King. Before we
Magic loves company, my friend.
Before
See you, John.
we get to our next guest, I think we need a little levity here, Jim.
Go ahead.
People may know about The Onion. It's a humor magazine, whatever you want to call it. The Onion has two great headlines. Here's the first one. A stressed nation asked Barack Obama if it can bum 340 million cigarettes. I love that one. And these people that you say they're undecided, they're going home to do their research, they're undecided. So here's the second Onion headline. Uninformed citizens scrambling to research last 2,500 years of democracy before voting.
I think that's a good move.
Yeah, that's another great one.
In any case, joining us now on the line is Amy Carnevale. She's been very patient while we're talking to John. She's the chair of the Massachusetts Republican Party. Amy, really appreciate your time. Thanks for calling in.
Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
Hey, Amy, thank you very much for joining us. So I believe the state party is obviously supporting Donald Trump. Are you too?
Yes, I am supporting Donald Trump. I think his policies would be far superior to Kamala Harris. I think the economy, many Republicans believe the economy was much better under Donald Trump, and so we're looking forward to seeing him reelected this evening.
How do you, I know this is a question you've been asked only 3,000 times, so make it 3,001. When you see some of the behaviors, forget the policy for a minute that you just spoke to, but some of the behaviors of the candidate, how do they strike you? How do you feel about that as someone who's working like a dog, to rebuild the Republican Party in our state?
Well, here at the Mass GOP, we've really been focused on our state-level candidates, and that's really where we put our energy and resources behind our candidates running for state senate, state representative, and some of our ballot questions as well. So that's really been our focus at the state party. We do have a volunteer chairman of the Trump campaign, and he's been activating supporters in support of the Trump candidacy here in Massachusetts. But as far as the state party goes, we've been really focused on our state level candidates.
Well, I should say, most people I know, even hardcore Democrats, think that more balance in Massachusetts would probably be a good thing for small d democracy. You obviously have a Republican running for the U.S. Senate. We spoke to John Deaton this morning. Two Democratic incumbent congresspeople, Lynch and Keating, have opponents. We know you're big-time supporters of Question 1, and we'll talk to a former and the current auditor in about 20 minutes. What's your top priority come today, Amy Carnevale, chair of the Mass GOP?
So we're really focused on legislative seats. And again, what you indicated earlier, bringing back that two-party system to Beacon Hill so that Republicans can be a more effective check on the Democratic supermajority that we see right now. And so by having more Republicans part of the process, they can bring about more transparency and more dialogue and debate.
Amy Carnevale, we have to ask you the question that Jim Browdy complains about all the time. He's always lambasting the legislature for their 5-month vacation. Do you think that that's currently enough time off, or do you think that they maybe should move to 6 months? What do you think?
I think that's plenty of time off. But again, if we had more Republicans on Beacon Hill, that could be a more robust debate subject.
We hope it will be a more robust debate. Amy, good luck today, and thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Now joining us is Amy's counterpart. He is the chair of the state Democratic Party. That would be Steve Kerrigan. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Hey, Steve Kerrigan, thank you very much for joining us. So how hopeful are you, let's start before we get to the presidential race, for the House and the Senate?
Look, I think we will, the Democratic Party and Vice President Harris has run a great campaign. I think it's going to bleed into us flipping the House to Democratic control. And the Senate's going to be a lot tighter, but I think there's a chance we hold the majority as well.
You think so? I mean, Tester is out in Montana is really, he's rather struggling, correct?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it was tough going in. There are 34 seats, and I think we had to defend 23 of them. Mm-hmm. John Tester's in a really tough spot. Sherrod Brown a little bit closer, but we start one down because of West Virginia, because Joe Manchin's leaving, and that seat's almost 100% going to a Republican. So we then get to 50-50, and so we've got to win both of those or pick up someplace else.
You know, you worked, I assume people know you worked for Barack Obama. You ran one of his conventions. Obama has spent a lot of time out campaigning. What's you're a pretty honest character. How much help is a non-candidate as popular as Obama is for the candidate herself there, Steve Kerrigan?
So I think what's good with surrogates is they can first draw a crowd, because the candidate can't be everywhere. Mm-hmm. They can't do every interview. So it's important to have explainers out there helping to make the case. But folks remember what this country was like under Barack Obama. They understand the type of leadership he brought. They trusted him. They believed in him. And I think having him there as a validator for her, not just because he was the first Black American president, and she will be hopefully the first female and Black American president, but because of what folks remember about Barack Obama. He's been in that job. It's important when she is running against former presidents to hear from other former presidents about what it takes to do the job, what character is needed. And I think his validation, the validation of former President Clinton, I think is important as well. And of course, I think, frankly, having people like Michelle Obama on the campaign trail are critically important as well.
Steve, I have one last question for you. We were talking about Montana a second ago, where at least if polling is correct, the Republican is likely to beat the Republican challenger Tim Sheehy is likely to beat the the Democratic incumbent. I'm so sorry, John Tester. Sheehy, I'm sure people have been reading about this, is a guy who claimed he was wounded in Afghanistan, I believe, as a Navy SEAL. There is absolutely no evidence of it, and a person who worked in the parks in that part of the country, in Montana's Rocky Mountains, I think, says, in fact, Sheehy was never shot. He was shot in a hunting accident in the national park there. And the evidence, I have to say, is overwhelming that Sheehy is lying. I've operated under the assumption, apparently wrongly, that the only person who could get away with this kind of stuff is Donald Trump, because he's a one of a kind in American history. Do you and your other chairs worry about that sort of thing, that sort of campaigning, trickling down and becoming baked into America's political system, even if there is no President Trump again?
Yeah, look, I've spent most of my career in public service or in politics, and I started in an era when you could fight against each other on the United States Senate floor and then walk off the floor, have a cup of coffee, and talk about your family and get to know each other and respect each other. We are now in this all or nothing game, and also, which leads to the world where we can say anything, and apparently that's okay. And if you get called on it, it doesn't matter. The most compelling part for me that folks who are just frustrated with Donald Trump is make sure he doesn't get into the White House again, and hopefully, the Republican Party will have a massive reset. It would be great to see it. It is something that this country desperately needs, because we are, for good or for ill, we are a two-party system, and we need both parties to be run by people who believe in facts, who believe in their candidates, who are honest brokers, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. You need that base element of honesty in order to get voters to trust you with the decisions that are going to impact their lives. And so, yeah, he's lying. No one seems to care about it. It's just similar to how the vice president would lay out an economic plan that every economist in the country says is fantastic, but it might not have this one bit of specificity on the price of eggs. And yet Donald Trump, who wants to tariff everything at 200% and doesn't understand what a tariff is the person best on the economy. So we just like to get back to some state of normalcy in this country. And my hope is that when Kamala Harris gets 308, 320 electoral votes tonight, we will start on that long road back.
Steve Kerrigan, as always, great to talk to you. Good luck today.
For joining us. That was Steve Kerrigan. He is chairman of the Massachusetts Democratic Party. Before break, we're going to take the squeeze in the call here. Bruce from Southern New Hampshire, thank you for calling.
Hi, Bruce.
Yeah, hi. How are you today?
Good. Fine, thanks. Sort of.
I just wanted to make a comment. You were talking earlier about the shy Kamala voter, and I think the same thing might be said about the shy military veteran or active duty voter. Everybody assumes these guys are just basically all Republican, and it's not my experience from what I hear regularly. And I think that could be a surprise in this whole thing.
Well, you know, it's funny, Bruce. I would say the opposite would be a surprise. For me, Marjorie and I, neither of us are veterans. We've talked about this a lot. There's virtually no group that, on one hand, Donald Trump says he loves more than veterans, who he has trashed more, from John McCain to Khizr Khan and his son, who gave his life, to suckers and losers. I guess I'd ask you, what are the veterans who are supporting Trump, who you have a relationship with, saying about why they're overlooking those things?
Well, I can't answer that because I don't know any veterans that are supporting Trump.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's the other way around.
Okay. Well, we shall. We got it, Bruce. We got to go, and we thank you for your call. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So the final question.
Yeah, we're taking a quick break, and then
we are. I'm sorry.
Yes, we're taking a quick break, and then we come back. We're going to have the pro and con side of the final question about auditing the legislature. The current auditor, Diana DiZoglio, is going to be with us, as well as the former auditor of the state of Massachusetts, Suzanne Bump. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Americans are headed to the polls for the final day of voting, and for once, both campaigns have the same message.
We're ready to get out the vote. We're ready to win.
Just go out and vote. And get your friends to vote, too. Bring them along.
I'm Ari Shapiro. All the latest election news on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Compass on the Bay, an assisted living community in South Boston, dedicated to those with Alzheimer's and related dementias, featuring research-based therapeutic programming. More at compassonthebay.com. And the International Conservation Fund in Boston, a charity working to avert climate change and biodiversity loss by partnering with NGOs and indigenous peoples globally. More at internationalconservationfund.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow at the library, we'll be joined in person by Doris Kearns Goodwin. Talk about a great day to have her with us. Juliette Kayyem, National Security Person, and Michael Curry from the NAACP and League of Community Health Centers. We're finishing our call out on the ballot questions today with question 1. That is the question about whether or not the Massachusetts State Auditor should have the authority to audit the, quote, finances and workings of the legislature. A yes vote would statutorily give her that authority. A no vote would make no changes. For the next few minutes, I guess it's going to be a tale of two auditors, because joining us now is Suzanne Bump. She served as Massachusetts State Auditor from 2011 to 2023, first woman elected to this role in the state's history. She wants you to vote no on question 1. Suzanne Bump, it's great to talk to you. Thanks so much for calling in.
Thanks. Delighted to be talking to you today.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. So tell us why you want voters to vote no on auditing the legislature.
Conceptually, there's nothing wrong with it. It's what the current auditor wants to use, how she wants to use that power. Audits are supposed to do, I'm sorry, I'm thrown off by the background.
We hear you fine. Are you okay, or do you need, give it a try.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Audits are supposed to utilize objective criteria in analyzing a government activity. What this auditor is proposing to do is to use her subjective opinions rather than objective criteria for determining how the legislature is performing its job. Constitutional issues have been raised already by the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, as well as any number of constitutional scholars who have looked at this, because it goes to discretionary activities within the legislature, not anything that's required of law for them. It's that potential for abuse by substituting opinion for fact in discretionary activities of the legislature that causes me to vote no. What's being proposed, not in the law, but in the words, the stated intentions of the auditor, DeZoglio, is completely contrary to government auditing standards and laws.
But can I just one question so people are clear,
Sure.
Auditor Bump, if I may. We've spoken to the Attorney General about this. She hasn't said there are constitutional problems. She said there could be.
She's raised the issue.
She's raised.
Yeah.
There may be problems. So just so I'm clear, if there was a constitutional challenge and it narrowed the scope of what the auditor can do, it's not what she wants to do, it's what the Constitution and statute would allow her to do, would you be comfortable with this then, after a constitutional challenge result?
In fact, years ago, I had in fact proposed this myself, but I wanted to use the power to audit within the framework of legally authorized government auditing standards. Auditor DeZoglio has made clear that she wants to use it in other ways, non-objective analysis of legislative activity.
But she's only entitled, ultimately, if this prevails, to do what is statutorily and constitutionally permissible. We got it.
I just think it's regrettable that we're having this waste of time over an ego trip.
Okay, well, we'll find out if she thinks it's an ego trip. Suzanne Bump, we really appreciate your time. Former state auditor urging a no on one, here to urge a yes on one, is the current state auditor who may want to respond to some of those things. That would be Diana DiZoglio. Auditor DiZoglio, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing great, Jim and Marjorie. It's great to be on. I do have an echo, so I don't know how we can resolve that. But
yeah, I'm sorry.
Amy's there.
Well, we hear you fine, so if you could do the best you can, if it becomes intolerable, let us know and we'll give it another go. But we hear you fine.
Could you hear Suzanne Bump, your predecessor? Could you hear her?
I did.
Okay.
I did, yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Why should people vote yes? And are you on an ego trip?
So I do want to say it has been an incredible challenge to be able to do the job alongside of my predecessor consistently coming out of retirement to try to sabotage the work we are doing. But we have done that work nonetheless. That's all I'll say about that. Friends, we have an opportunity to make meaningful, bold change here in the state of Massachusetts to return a practice that was always in existence. The state auditor has always actually historically audited the state legislature. In fact, Suzanne Bump is actually the only auditor who hasn't audited the legislature, to my understanding. Even former auditor Joe DiNucci audited the legislature. And, during his tenure and during my tenure, the legislature has pushed back and stated that they don't believe they should be subject to the audits that they've always historically been subject to. We have over 100 years demonstrating precedent. Now, the legislature audits the executive branch agencies. I think it's important to mention that. They conduct what is called performance audits, the same type of audit that our office conducts, actually. They conduct those audits through their post-audit and oversight committee. Over the executive branch, they have subpoena authority to be able to get access to documents, receipts, information, and even to require testimony from the executive branch. That's the way it's set up in our system of checks and balances. The executive branch has a state auditor's office, which is called to audit all of the entities of government in our system of checks and balances. And we are simply seeking to return the practice that always existed until, in recent years, legislative leaders have vehemently opposed these efforts, citing that they believe they're exempt. Folks, let's not miss this moment. We have one of the least transparent state legislatures in the nation, not subject to public records laws, not subject to open meeting laws, recently ranked as the least efficient state legislature in the entire nation. And while conducting an audit won't prevent all of those things from occurring moving forward, it is one way that we can get access to things like receipts, to financial information, to state contracting and procurement information in an attempt to help make our government work better for the taxpayers that it's meant to serve. I'm really excited about Yes on One. I'm excited about the opportunity we have here in the state of Massachusetts to shine a bright light in some of those dark areas of state government. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Please vote Yes on One.
Diana DiZoglio, Auditor of Massachusetts. We really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Diana. Good luck.
Diana DiZoglio, Auditor, urging a yes on one. So for most of the rest of the show, we're going to take your calls and texts. We're going to talk to a couple of our reporters actually who are out in the field talking to real voters. But other than that, the rest of today's show is yours at 877-301-8097. Doesn't talking to people give you a respite from the anxiety for the most part, unless they add to the anxiety with what they say?
Yes,
it's like
does.
a good, wonderful diversion.
Well, lots of people seem to be keeping it together.
What are they
admire
saying?
them. Well, Maura Healey's keeping it together. I guess if you run for office, you should be able to keep it together. I mean, she is the governor after all.
Yeah, like Donald Trump, by the way, has kept it together pretty well. I think. Is that what you meant? You run for office, you serve, and obviously you're calm and
he may be
together.
An exception.
Okay, fine.
Let's go to Mark in Rhode Island. What do you think, Mark?
Hello, Mark.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I'm doing my volunteer work today as a poll worker, monitor, I should say.
Yep.
And everything's going well. People are voting without trouble here in Rhode Island. Everything's smooth, and it's just,
good.
Why do you do this, by the way? Hey, Mark, I don't know if you're listening to John King, who never misses an opportunity to praise work like that which you're doing and the people who choose to volunteer to do it. Why do you do what you do? Why are you volunteering to be a poll worker?
Well, I'm not actually poll worker. I'm a poll monitor for Common Cause.
Whatever. So why'd you decide to do that?
Because our democracy depends on people doing these things.
Good enough answer for me. I'm thrilled that you're doing it. I love it when anybody goes out in a peaceful way to help ensure a fair and free election, and you're doing it. Mark, thank you much for the call. Good luck in Rhode Island. 877-301-8970 is the number. You look very intense there,
Well, I'm
Margaret.
trying to read some of the text messages. Andy in Boston, why I'm not nervous. Thank you, Andy, for telling us this. Number one, I've never believed the polls. Number two, I don't agree that the election will be close in such a polarized environment. Foreign Trump supporters, especially women, didn't want to be out there saying they would vote for Harris. Number two again, of the 7 swing states, it has 5 have Democratic governors and 4 have Democratic secretaries of state. By the way, that's a big deal, obviously, because there's a lot of concern about what happened last year, or in 2020, I should say, when the former president called up the Secretary of State in Georgia asking for 11,000 votes.
A Republican who voted for him, by the way.
And Gabriel Sherman, who's the other guy in that office who's very involved in voting, he resisted him too.
Another Republican.
Right, but this texter is saying that in those swing states they have Democrats in those positions. That makes this person a little bit less nervous. And as he points out, the texter, that in Georgia, Kemp and Rafflesberger, he's the Secretary of State. Kemp, of course, is the governor, aren't going to do Trump any favors. And Nevada's governor is facing a Democratic majority legislature. So there you go.
877-301-8970. I'm sure we're going to blow this. Ornella, is that your name in Westboro?
Hi, yes it is.
Oh, my God. Well, good for me. Welcome to the show, Ornella. How are you?
I'm great. Thank
Good.
you.
What's up?
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Well, I'm really calling to voice my opposition to question 4, legalization of psychedelics.
You know, Ornella, I hate to do this to you. You've waited so long. We're not going to hang up on you. We're going to put you on hold, and we're going to hope you're in a better
place.
Yeah, move a little bit, and after we talk to Molly in West New... Oh, she hung up. Call back, Ornella, and we will try to get you in. It's just the connection was such that we couldn't understand what you were saying. Let's go to Molly in West Newbury. Hey, Molly.
Hi. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I live in a very blue state. So my last few weeks have been phone banking for Pennsylvania, and it is so rewarding. It releases endorphins that you can't believe, and it's important work.
When you call, are you trying to persuade or just to get people who are committed to get out and vote?
We're not supposed to persuade. You can share your views and hope to help them. Mm-hmm. But I also help them find how to cure their ballot if there's a problem.
Great.
If they need a ride to the polls, Philadelphia has Souls to the Polls. And it just is really rewarding to hear people's stories. I had someone that was 21 yesterday, lived in a very religious household. His family prohibited him from voting. And he was casting his first ballot today for Kamala Harris, and he was over the moon excited for the freedom to do that.
That's a beautiful story, Molly.
Not to put a damper on that beautiful story, but I was reading about Philadelphia this morning, and it's pretty scary about how they had to move their whole election operation away from downtown to the northeastern part of the city, and they've got barbed wire and security checkpoints all around the election operation. And all around in these swing states, talking about bomb threats and envelopes filled with strange things. I mean, it is pretty frightening stuff.
Well, look what's happening in Washington too. So there's not another January 6th in November.
Yeah, putting up all the fences all over.
All the plywood and the fences and the wire.
And restaurants doing that as well.
I know it.
But the talk has been that it's not going to be a huge national thing because, as Juliet Kayyem said, that the prosecutions of a lot of the people January 6th may have dampened the enthusiasm for that. It may be more localized in different parts of the country instead of one big bang thing down in Washington.
Well, let's just hope local authorities can have the resources to handle this kind of thing. Hopefully it doesn't arise much. Jeremiah in New Bedford, welcome.
Howdy ho there, neighbors.
Hey.
I just wanted to call and say I am so proud to be Puerto Rican today and to be able to and have a voice and hopefully turn the tides in this election. Go Puerto Rico.
Who's your candidate, Jeremiah?
Kamala.
Yeah. Do you sense that there was a lot of upset? Is that anything to do with the garbage remarks at the Madison Square Garden rally, or were you always there?
I was always there, but I think there was a sense that that incident has pulled people to the right side of the conversation.
Great. Jeremiah, thank you very much for the call. Appreciate it. Are our colleagues ready to report to us now, or are they still?
I don't think they're there yet.
Okay. Beth in Weymouth, thank you for calling.
Hello, Beth.
Hi. I'm calling because I have a concern about the lack of trust in the election process.
Yeah.
And I heard something recently that really struck me, and that was a town that had an election duty similar to jury duty. Any registered voter was required to participate through a jury pool in the election process.
I don't know what that. I don't know what that means, Beth.
That they would be selected to assist in the process, in the at the poll, in the count, all of that, so that what came out of that was people having trust in the process because they participated. They got to see it firsthand.
Oh, it was better after they participated in the process, you mean? Is that what you mean, Beth?
We have another atrocious connection, which seems to be the order of the day. I'm sorry, Beth. Thank you for your call. Our apologies for this mess here.
Yeah.
We're going to be joined now by two of our colleagues who are actually talking to real people out in the world. Liz Nieslaus is at an elementary school, a voting station in Revere. I think she was in Saugus earlier in the day. Paris Olson is at the Lila G. Frederick School in Dorchester's Grove Hall. And I should mention about Paris, from what we understand, she is wide awake, too, which is a wonderful change in her schedule.
Yeah, I should
Paris
have
and
been up
Liz,
so early.
great to have you both.
Thanks for having us,
Thank
Jim
you.
and Marjorie.
Yeah, so let's start with you, Paris. What's going on in Grove Hall?
Well, I will say it is a difference from the energy at Florian Hall in Dorchester, another part of Dorchester this morning where I was early. Yes, you know, the demographics are different and the motivations for coming out to vote are different for many people. But at the end of the day, people just want to have their voices heard. And it's a very chill and efficient spirit here at the Lila G. School. People are getting you in and out, and they're also cheering all first-time voters. In fact, someone asked me when I cast my ballot, because this is my polling place, they said, "Are you a first-time voter?" I said, "Oh, no." But they said, "Oh, well, you sure do look like one," which I just, thank you to the fountain of youth.
There you go.
No one's ever saying that to me, Paris. Let me just tell you.
So, Paris, I'm guessing that it was much more of a Kamala crowd in Grove Hall and much more of a Trump crowd in Florian Hall?
Just about, yes, Marjorie.
Yeah.
The folks that I spoke to, it did seem to split along those lines. But you never know. I mean, as you all have been talking about throughout the afternoon, there are some quiet Trump and Harris voters who might surprise you today.
Liz, how about in Revere? What's the turnout been like?
So the turnout, it's a gorgeous day. So the turnout is slow but steady. I'm in Revere now. Earlier I was in Saugus, and I have to say, Jim, if you were going to call the election based on who I spoke to in Saugus, it would be Trump. And Saugus is really interesting, very white community, a lot of unaffiliated voters. So they really don't say they align with a particular party. But Saugus has gone between going for Barack Obama to Trump to Biden. But I spoke to about a dozen voters, and the majority, certainly all the men, said they were voting for Trump.
You know, by the way, we should just add
though, Marjorie.
to one thing Liz said. I assume most people listening know in Massachusetts there are more unenrolled voters than the combined number of people who identify or is enrolled as Democrats and Republicans. Paris, I don't know if we asked you this. You talked about the sentiment, but what's the turnout been like at the places you've spent time at today?
So this morning at Florian Hall, within the first about hour, Jim, there were more than 50 people who had come through here. While I've been at the Lila G. School, I probably would count about, in the past half hour, about maybe 20 people or so. So it's steady, and I noticed on the ballot counting machine when I cast it, mine, it said 870. So we know they've said there are 1,000 more ballots to go. Secretary of State Bill Galvin, as this, I think it was about 1 o'clock today, said we were at 1.7 million, but we were on track to surpass the 3.6 million ballots cast in 2020.
Liz Niesloss, Paris Alston, we really appreciate reports from the field. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us, to both of you.
Thank you. And Jim, I have to leave you with a Tupac reference because of how this all started, right? Today, if the ballot or the election was a Tupac song, can you guess which one it would be?
No, but tell me.
All Eyes on Me.
That's
By
great.
the way, for those who did not hear, what Paris is referencing is when Paris and I were lucky enough to have an opportunity to interview Vice President Harris at the NAACP convention.
And by the way, I'm really
summer.
sorry I took that day off. I didn't know she was going to be running for president, Paris.
She was fabulous. And what was the topic of your first question to the sitting Vice President of the United States, Paris Olson?
I was like, well, we got to lay the groundwork here and set the tone and just say we all have love for Tupac Shakur. And that was in part because Jim used to babysit him.
I did. When I was a legal services lawyer, his mother was Fanny, was a paralegal in my office, and I babysat the beautiful little 4-year-old Tupac quite a bit. Paris and Liz, great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much for taking the time to call in. We really appreciate it. Paris Alston and Liz Niesloss. Thank you very
Now
much.
I'm nervous again. I got through 3 hours, and I was relatively relaxed. And now the show's about to be over in a handful of minutes, and I'm a bowl of Jell-O. How are you doing, Marjorie Egan?
Well, I mean, John King said it, that Trump, at least according to what we know in the polls now, is in the best position he's been in from
three cycles,
three cycles, 2016, 2020. So that, you would say, would bode well for the former president and not bode well for Kamala Harris. But again, it's so close.
Well, if you speak to the woman, the pollster in Iowa, she says, in fact, in the final minutes, I think in part because of Trump's behavior in the last 10 days, but in part because of the reaction to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, she says women are coming out in record numbers. We shall see. Let's try to squeeze in Ornella because I think we lost you because the sound was bad from Westboro. Let's give it another go, Ornella. Welcome.
All right. Thank you so
much.
Much better. Great. Happy to hear. So thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I am calling to speak about the ballot question 4, and I'm actually calling to encourage voters to vote no. And I'd like for voting no would be in alignment with the American Psychiatric Society, the Massachusetts Psychiatric Society, the Mass Medical Society, our legislature, our Massachusetts State Police, as well as Massachusetts Municipal Society. So all of our state experts, medical societies are urging people to vote no out of great concern for the lack of regulation and guardrails for this question. So as written, it is reckless and dangerous.
What's your, Ornella, in addition to the organizations you cited, why your personal opposition?
I know that for people that have suffered any mental health issues, people who have a history of psychosis, this can wreak havoc on their mental health. So I think the question as written, while it's deceptively written that it could help with mental health, I'm really concerned that the scientific method is not being considered in this. While we may have cases where it has helped, I think we need to leave this to our medical societies, not ballot initiatives.
Ornella, we really appreciate your time and your thoughts, and thanks for bearing with us in terms of the sound. Thank you very much. Let's go to Charlotte in Gloucester. Hi, Charlotte.
Charlotte.
Hi, you two. I'm so happy to talk to you.
Yeah, happy you called, Charlotte.
This is Charlotte, the celebrated award-winning writer, correct?
Yo, that's me.
That is you. Wow. It's great to talk to you, Charlotte. What's up?
Yeah. I just wanted to talk about my experience phone banking with the Sunrise Movement yesterday and how interesting it was.
Please.
Yeah, they're so great. First of all, I was a million years older than all the people who were there.
Tell people what it is. Tell people what the Sunrise Movement is, Charlotte.
It's a youth movement for climate.
Yep.
Thank you. It's a great movement. I mean, kids are idealistic and hardworking and amazing. But what interested me is that they were very clear that they don't really like Kamala. And they were like, yeah, we get it that you probably aren't going to like her, but you still have to vote for her because she's the only one who's going to do anything for climate. And, Trump is a crook and is evil. So that was my first time phone banking for a group that was like, yeah, we don't really like our candidate, but you still have to vote for her. And I don't know. I thought it was interesting.
I like the honesty. Hey, Charlotte, it's great to speak with you. It's been a while. Thanks so much for the call. We appreciate it. By the way, Sunrise Movement, many people think deserve a lot of the credit for the win that Ed Markey got over Joe Kennedy. They were a pretty critical piece of that sort of surprise campaign.
The New York Times has got a great piece today about young people, teenagers all around the world who's already lost their homes in climate vulnerable areas, and their homes aren't coming back. And it's in the United States as well as in different countries around the world. It's a very sad story.
But aren't you, I know we've had this discussion before we go to Jared Bowen, our colleague. Climate has been far too little a part of this campaign. And maybe it's because of the fracking issue and how important it is in Pennsylvania, obviously the most important state, arguably. But it's been disappointing that there's been so little mention.
It's been very politicized. And once again, you hear all these lies about things. If I hear one more person tell me that the wind farms kill the whales, I'm going to jump off the bridge. But you hear this constantly, especially on Cape Cod, where they're building a wind farm, and it's very discouraging. Anyway, we're joined now on the phone on Zoom by Jared Bowen. Hi, Jared.
Hey, Jared.
Hey, it's great to see you both.
Did you vote?
I did vote. And we'll find out the results.
I didn't mean who'd you vote
soon.
for. I mean, where'd you vote and what was
crowded?
it like?
I voted just by submitting it into the ballot box on Friday.
Oh,
so
okay.
I got my ballot in early.
Okay.
I knew today was going to be a busy day. I didn't want to take any chances, of course, so that was a good way for me to do it.
Now, are you nervous? I mean, are you planning carefully what you're going to be doing this evening to get through the evening?
Well, I have to say, tonight I'm doing the speaker series, which
great.
is interesting. We have Annette Gordon-Reed, the historian. So I think if there's anybody I would like to be with on election night, and especially this election night, it would be with an historian, especially that one. So that's where I will be until at least 9:30, so wonderfully distracted and hopefully getting great context.
Well, you spend time with that historian tonight, who is great, and you spend time listening or watching Doris Kearns Goodwin with us tomorrow. Not a bad historian in her own right. Wouldn't you agree?
I think it is. We are so fortunate to be having the exposure we have and the wisdom that will be at our feet with both women.
In light of the fact they almost never say anything nice to you because it's so much fun to play with you in lots of ways. I was listening to your interview with Andre DeBose. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes,
the third. Yesterday.
Yeah. He's got a new book. Sounds great.
One of the most engaging human beings. That was a fabulous interview you did, and he was fabulous and honest to the point of painfulness. It was a beautiful interview. So congratulations to you both.
Well, thank you. He is just a phenomenal writer. I was emailing him this morning because I felt much the same way, so I needed to tell him in person.
Great.
What's on today?
Oh yeah, I forgot that. What's on today?
We're going to start with music, and this is very intentional because other people have made it intentional. The Boston Symphony Orchestra will be having a Duke Ellington tribute concert this week, including a free one on Friday. They know that this is election week. They know that people would want music, so Duke Ellington is the way to go. We'll start the show that way. We'll also talk about the Puppet Free Library. This is fabulous. It's a library in Boston. Operates just like a library. You go in, you find a puppet you like, you sign it out, and do hopefully wonderful things with it, perform street performances, what have you. And then we will be talking about the countdown to 2026 with Catherine Allgore, the historian. We'll talk about Abigail Adams imploring John Adams to remember the ladies.
Remember the ladies. On that note, thank you very much,
See you,
Jared Bowen.
Good luck today.
See you later. You too.
Okay,
Bye.
we are done for today. Thank you to people that came down to the Boston Public Library.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you to those that
appreciate
listened
it.
wherever you did. You can keep up with us 24/7 way of our podcast, our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio as well. Tomorrow we're going to be joined by the great historian Doris Kearns Goodwin right here at the library, national security expert Juliet Kayyem, the NAACP's Michael Curry, who has been out at poll watching, our food man Corby Cummer. We want to thank our crew, who's pretty good most of the time today. They did a otherworldly job, as Jim Browdy would say.
Wait, Jim Browdy?
Jim Browdy. Otherworldly, awesome, spectacular. That would be Zoe Matthews. Oops, I'm really
Whoever
screwing
she
this up.
is, right? It's her birthday.
Zoe Matthews, happy birthday, Zoe. Aiden Conley,
Too late.
Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jay Bologna. Thank you guys very, very much.
Can we stop there for a second?
What?
I don't think people know how hard it is to put together a 3-hour show where virtually every candidate, every person on a ballot question, every elected official in Massachusetts gets in at the precise time. It was brilliantly constructed,
And
actually.
think about it, Jim. They put up with me and you every day.
Well, at least one of us. That's right.
Okay, thanks to our team here at the library, Bill Francis, Brad Lewis, Juan Jose
By the way,
Cadena.
Nicole just wrote you a note, our coworker, said, thank you, Marjorie. You did pretty good, too.
There you go. Thank you.
Trending. What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts,